Chapter 658. In the spectator's stands of the two vast Battle King platforms, the atmosphere was already as hot as a volcano erupting. But after hearing those two words, it became even hotter. Countless curious, amazed, and astonished gazes were fixed on the two tall youths on the platform. Lin Sheng was handsome and had a natural smile on his face. His calm demeanor, neither servile nor overbearing, was rather surprising. No matter what, there was a great disparity in strength between the two battle platforms. The fact that he dared to come to this battle platform already meant something. On the other Battle King platform, a star domain spread out, as if there were thousands of stars hanging high in the sky. Time seemed to have suddenly changed tonight. The resplendent starlight made the eyes of countless people twinkle. The figure under the starry sky had 6 colorful wings on his back. His colorful eyes were burning with inextinguishable starlight. His expression was calm, as if he was a god looking down on all living things. His temperament and aura made many girls cry out in surprise. Yin Nuoxing's grand entrance was simply for show. Junior Brother's entrance is so magnificent, so cool, so beautiful. I wonder how strong he is. Is such a flashy entrance a gimmick? Star Domain? Why do I think of that time in the spiritual light tower? This guy is wearing a mask again. He's dressed like a sissy. Many people were stunned when they saw the starry sky. At that time, the spiritual light tower had also rendered a star domain. It was when someone passed the 5th stage. A starry sky appeared under the dome of the sky, as if there were 2 starry skies. Slowly descending from the sky, Yin Nuoxing's feet gently touched the Battle King platform. He steadied himself and raised his colorful eyes to look at the 2 people in front of him. His hands were placed in front of his lower abdomen, and the star domain behind him slowly disappeared. His huge 6 wings were folded behind him like a screen. Junior Brother, the look in his eyes has changed. It makes one's heart palpitate. It's like an arrogant phoenix looking down on those who dare to challenge his majesty. Lin Rant's eyes widened slightly. The Yin Nuoxing who appeared now was serious in speech and manner. The smile on his face had completely disappeared, and the smile in his eyes had also disappeared. At this moment, he was like a king, looking down disdainfully on those who dare to challenge his authority. He was aloof and arrogant. 6-winged. 6-winged. It sounds familiar, but it's very unfamiliar. Do you guys think of anything? Chuan Mu frowned slightly. Humans could not grow 6 wings on their backs, unless they cultivated some special profound art. Hearing this, Lin Ran and Zhong Songling shook their heads. They were not sure. Is it this little guy who caused such a huge commotion? Half-devil rank 3rd transformation. He's a good seedling, but he still needs some time. In the air above the Battle King platform, a group of old men gathered together, looking down at the Battle King platform with faint smiles on their faces. This little guy is naturally one of the main characters, but I'm more concerned about another little guy. That little guy who came at the star field does have some skills. I can't see through his strength. I'm afraid there's something special in his body. Oh, but I'm more concerned about the other one. Did you notice that his energy is not devil chi? Not devil chi? This is star field energy? Compared to God origin energy, it's even purer and more powerful. The energy of the world's origin is second only to the pure energy of a God rank expert. TSK, this little guy is not simple. Old bastards, are you guys playing dumb or what? Star field energy. Star field energy. This old man said that this is star field energy. I've already said it 3 times. Do you still remember the spiritual light tower a few days ago? That star field that lit up the sky was formed by star field energy. Could it be that this little guy passed the 7th stage? Impossible. Only God rank experts can pass the 7th stage. In the entire Longguang Academy, have you seen a second person who has star field energy? No. If this little guy really passed the 7th stage, then it's a little terrifying. A group of figures appeared at a corner of the Battle King stage. The person at the front had a calm expression, but his gaze was somewhat complicated when he looked at Lin Sheng. This person was Tang Yang. After being defeated by Lin Sheng in the third freshman assessment, he had gone into seclusion for a long period of time. Now that he had come out and heard about the latter, he could not help but sigh softly. Lin Sheng, you're the one who defeated me. If you lose to that kind of trash, I'll kill you. Tang Yang tightly clenched his fists and took a deep breath. Unwillingness flashed across his eyes. However, at this moment, all of his attention was on the Battle King stage, and the emotions in his eyes were hidden. At this moment, all of the freshmen were paying attention to Lin Sheng, who had created many inconceivable things. When he faced Bayuya, would he be crushed, or would he risk his life to survive? They were all very curious. Everyone's gazes gathered on the two Battle King stages, their eyes filled with anticipation. Under the attentive gazes of countless people, Lin Sheng and Bayuya's gazes slowly came into contact with each other. The air seemed to have solidified at this moment. You did this to call me over, then crush me, humiliate me, and destroy my confidence. Is that it? Interesting. Lin Sheng took a deep breath and spoke in an extremely rude manner. Bayuya's eyes slightly narrowed, tightly staring at Lin Sheng as he said, Bai Hong's method was a little overboard. I've already taught him a lesson. As for your people, don't worry, I won't touch them. However, no matter how useless my idol brother is, he's still my brother. You've seriously injured him and nearly crippled him. This debt needs to be settled. Bayuya still had an indifferent expression. The gaze that he used to stare at Lin Sheng was devoid of joy or sorrow. Lin Sheng gave a non-committal smile. If Bai Hong had not been going all out to kill him that day, he would not have been so heavy-handed. He only had himself to blame. A trace of calmness flashed past his pitch-black eyes. Lin Sheng took a deep breath. His voice became slightly deeper as he slowly said, Senior Bayuya, please tell me the rules of this battle, or the method. Don't worry, the matter of challenging a new student is already embarrassing enough. However, this is also a promise to that useless fellow. I will give you a chance. You can set the rules. As long as it's fair, I will agree. Bayuya lightly nodded his head and said. Lin Sheng glanced at him in surprise. After that, he glanced at Yun Nuoxing, who was on another battle stage far away. This Bayuya really wanted him to set the rules. He felt that this fellow seemed to be able to predict everything. Bayuya also followed his gaze and looked at Yun Nuoxing. Looking at the latter's calm and reserved temperament, the aura that was like that of a king, he could not help but be stunned. He softly said, Did he give you confidence? Lin Sheng shrugged his shoulders. There was indeed a bit of this reason. If he had to fight against Bayuya alone, he would have a headache. The difference of 7 or 8 realms was not something that could be made up for by putting his life on the line. Before he met Yun Nuoxing, that was indeed what he thought. However, what happened yesterday had overturned his thoughts. Lin Sheng slowly raised his hand and slowly extended a finger. He faintly said, How about we decide the victor in one move? Bayuya was stunned for a moment. After that, he faintly shook his head. If he used all his strength, he could still block it. However, there was not much meaning in doing so. It would make this battle seem like a child's play. Seeing Bayuya shake his head, Lin Sheng was not surprised. It was just a casual suggestion. After a moment, he slightly restrained his expression and extended 3 slender fingers. His sharp eyes stared at Bayuya as he softly said, Round battle. 3 rounds. The 2 of us will choose the offensive and defensive positions. If you attack, I will defend. If I defend, you attack. How about it? In the spectator stands, many people narrowed their eyes. 3 rounds of round battle. Basically, a crazy battle would be concentrated on these 3 attacks. Moreover, in the offensive and defensive positions, generally, the defensive side would have the advantage. When one sees the opponent's attack, one would be able to counter it. If they were Lin Sheng, they would at least fight for 2 defenses. If it was 3 defenses, it would be even better. If Bayuya defended 3 times, Lin Sheng would basically have no show to watch. His attack would be ruthlessly disintegrated. However, even if Bayuya defended 3 times, it would not be that easy to block. It was not that there were no people in the Farlight Academy who could block Bayuya's attack. However, Lin Sheng's name should not be among them. Even if his reputation was not weak, It was unlikely that he could block Bayuya's attack. Under the attentive gazes of countless people, Bayuya did not think much and nodded his head. After that, he slowly raised his head and glanced at Lin Sheng. He let out a long breath and said, 2 attacks and 1 defense. If you block them all, it will be my loss. What do you think? All right. Lin Sheng silently nodded his head. He also tightly stared at Bayuya. A trace of sharp aura slowly circulated around his body. When the latter saw Lin Sheng's appearance, he could not help but sigh. After that, he transmitted his voice. No matter how this battle turns out, all grudges will be written off. I will also release the person in one piece. Lin Sheng's eyes slightly narrowed. He clenched his fists tightly. After that, he deeply inhaled a breath of air and heavily nodded his head. The half-immortal and half-devil aura within his body gushed out without any restraint. There was also a green-blue flame that slowly flowed out from his body. The surrounding air started to distort because of the flame. He raised his hand and said, "Senior, please enlighten me." These 3 rounds were the essence of thousands of rounds of battle. There was no warm-up, no preparation. Once they attacked, it would definitely be a storm of attacks. There was no luck in this round battle. On the 10,000 feet tall Battle King's platform, Yin Nuoxing slowly turned around and looked towards Lin Sheng. What surprised him was that Xin Yuan and Yin Mo had also sat down cross-legged and looked at the battle. It seemed like they did not intend to start so quickly. Yin Nuoxing also slowly knelt down. His colorful eyes calmly looked towards the battle and casually asked, "Which one of you will go first?" "Don't worry, it won't be a round-robin battle. However, if you want to fight 1 against 2, it's not impossible." Yin Mo did not turn his head. He only glanced at Yin Nuoxing from the corner of his eyes. His hands were slightly clenched. The incident that happened in the Azure Cloud Pavilion that day still made him tremble in fear. However, he also believed that Yin Nuoxing was just lucky back then. This time, on the Battle King's platform, he would not be so lucky. "You feel that it's inconceivable," Yin Nuoxing said indifferently, causing the 2 of them to be stunned. Their brows furrowed slightly. Then they heard him continue. "That day you exchanged 36 moves with me in the Azure Cloud Pavilion. Every move was blocked by me with just enough strength. At that time, you should have sensed something. Or is it that you find it inconceivable that a so-called new student can do this?" Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath. His colorful eyes were slightly cold. This so-called battle invitation was meaningless to Yin Nuoxing. When Yin Mo and the others were still fighting, he was already used to this scale of battle. At this moment, all the battle power he controlled could even blast a large crater in a large area. This was the power he risked his life to cultivate. It was the power he used to suppress powerful enemies. This kind of small battle was meaningless to him. Hearing Yin Nuoxing mention the Azure Cloud Pavilion, Yin Mo's expression turned slightly cold. However, before he could say anything, Yin Nuoxing spoke again indifferently. "Your starting point is this Farlight Academy. You grew up steadily and peacefully in this tall, ivory tower. However, my footprints have already spread throughout the world. My battlefields are chaotic and terrifying. They are filled with destructive elements. I have never moved them into this academy. This is just a place for me to rest. There is no need for unnecessary battles. You don't understand at all. You don't understand anything. You just continue to walk down this path. You are arrogant. You look down on others. You think you're infallible, including myself. It is the same." Chapter 659. Under the scorching sun in the sky, the atmosphere in the noisy Battle King stage seemed to have frozen. Especially those few indifferent words. It made the surrounding audience's voices become softer. Just because you went out to see a little of the world, you think you're better than others and don't put others in your eyes? Yin Mo sneered. A sinister look flashed across his scarred face as he said indifferently, "I've seen many people like you. In the end, they all became ghosts under the blade of others. In the end, they still held onto their self-righteous knowledge and died with grievances. You think you're better than others, right?" Yin Nuoxing smiled faintly and said, Perhaps this is also my original sin. You can think whatever you want. However, some people are indeed born high and mighty. The achievements that you've worked so hard for so long are easily obtained by others. As for the ranks of such people, I admit that I'm not one of them. The world is unfair. Everyone's vision is different. For example, you're using this place as a starting point to fight for a distant goal. But to me, this is just a small foothold. If it weren't for the spiritual light pagoda, I wouldn't even appear in front of you. Huh? Yenemo laughed loudly. His voice contained some coldness. You talk big. You think you're the godchild of some great force? You've been dreaming too much. Dreaming? I seem to be the godchild of the 9 deities' palace. Yin Nuashing tilted his head and said indifferently in his heart. Then he sighed. I've said it before. You can think whatever you want. But now, you don't even know who your opponent is. You don't even understand your opponent, yet you rashly issued a challenge. You stubbornly believe that it's impossible for a freshman to be stronger than a senior. If this isn't arrogance, then what is? Yin Nuashing took a deep breath and slowly raised his head to look at the sun in the sky. He said indifferently, when the curtain falls, how are you going to clean up the mess? I've been cultivating in the Farlight Academy for 5 years, and I'm at the peak of the demon rank. I've completed a god rank mission alone, and I've even killed a demigod rank expert. You're just a new student, and you're at most a 4th seal of the demon rank. Do you think you have the power to fight a demigod rank expert? Yenemo clenched his teeth tightly. Yin Nuashing's indifferent expression made him a little frustrated. Yin Nuashing didn't say anything. She just turned her head and glanced at him. Meaningless argument. After he finished speaking, he did not look at him again. He just stared at Lin Sheng in the distance and sighed. You. That look of disdain made the veins on Yin Mo's forehead bulge. The veins on his palm bulged like dragons, as if they were about to burst out with a great power. Xian Yuan stretched out his hand to block him. He frowned slightly and looked at Yin Nuashing. The feeling the latter gave him was completely different from the first time they met. It was as if he was a completely different person. If the first time they met, he was a sunny and cheerful youth who had stage fright, then right now, he was like a sharp divine sword. That sharp sword light would bring about devastating damage to everyone. 6 colored wings? There doesn't seem to be such a person in the southern part of the Sourcepeak region, right? Could it be that he came from another region? Yin Nuashing's words just now made Xian Yuan a little suspicious. However, he couldn't think of a person with such a characteristic. He subconsciously thought that he came from another region. This should have been the most eye-catching battle stage, but at this moment, it was dead silent. However, everyone could feel the hostile atmosphere, which made the nearby spectators feel a little depressed. They quickly turned the atmosphere to the other battle stage. Senior, please enlighten me. When Lin Sheng's deep and solemn voice echoed throughout the Battle King platform, everyone could feel that the air in the Battle King platform had stopped flowing. The atmosphere had become extremely solemn, and even the noise in the surroundings had slowly died down. In the end, it had completely disappeared. Everyone's gaze was tightly fixed on the 2 slender figures in the arena. Baiyu took a deep breath and looked at the handsome youth in front of him who was ready to fight. His eyes were firm, and after a moment, he lightly nodded his head. He stabbed the long sword in his hand into the ground and slowly rolled up his sleeves. The slender hands hidden in his sleeves slowly slid out. It was a pair of wheat-colored hands. They were extremely slender, but they contained a shocking amount of power. I will use my full strength, Baiyu softly murmured. Soon after, blue veins suddenly appeared on his wheat-colored hands. Soon after, everyone could feel that the elemental energy and the world's energy in the surroundings had become chaotic. An astonishing energy fluctuation rushed towards his hands that were unceasingly moving. A demon-grade expert could borrow the world's energy and the elemental energy of the world. That kind of energy was unimaginably huge. Once it was used, it would tell the opponent that he was going to use his full strength. Compared to Baiyu's unceasingly gushing aura, Lin Sheng appeared to be much calmer. He had even slowly closed his eyes as the scene from the day before in the cold ice prison kept replaying in his mind. A lump of frost aura also slowly surged into his palm as a green-blue flame continued to burn, completely wrapping around his body. No matter how strong the wind blew, he remained motionless. Gulp. The sound of saliva being swallowed could be heard from the spectator's stand. Bayuya's aura was a bit terrifying. They were also firmly staring at the two of them. The battle could be triggered in an instant. They might miss it if they blinked their eyes. Roar! Bayuya took a heavy step forward, causing the entire Battle King stage to tremble. A deep roar resounded from his throat as a domineering aura soared to the heavens. That domineering aura caused everyone's breathing to turn sluggish. Both of his hands slowly froze. His two wheat-colored hands had actually turned a little earthy yellow at this moment. A surging aura that was as deep as the earth burst out from his body. This guy's tyrannical emperor's divine art is getting more and more terrifying. Guyu couldn't help knitting his brows when he saw the aura of a single person. He had also exchanged blows with Bayuya and had seen the latter's tyrannical emperor's divine art. He was certain that it wasn't as terrifying as this. Bayuya slowly exhaled a turbid yellow aura. The energy that filled the sky frantically surged into his hands and slowly condensed into a deep yellow seal. Like a crystal layer, it covered both of his hands. Within the crystal layer, there was a heart-palpitating energy that was slowly being emitted. Feeling the strength of that energy, some of the older students were alarmed. Their hearts trembled. This Bayuya wasn't joking. He's going all out from the start. Tyrannical Emperor's divine art. Although it's only a low-peak rank, Bayuya has already cultivated it to perfection. It's also one of his killing moves. That domineering aura can fight against anything. Once it enters the body, the energy within the body will be disturbed by that energy. Thus, the energy within the body can't be used. Guyu looked at this scene and let out a long sigh. He stared at Lin Sheng, who was still calm. He sighed in his heart. How are you going to deal with it? When Deshawn and the others heard this, their faces sunk. Isn't that bullying? Stepping onto the Battle King stage is Bayuya's recognition of Lin Sheng. If the battle on the Battle King stage is the same as usual, it'll be like child's play. There's no need for it to exist. If Bayuya goes easy on Lin Sheng, it'll be looking down on him. Chuan Mu glanced at the three of them and said indifferently, "Over there, the atmosphere is so tense that it's about to collapse. Why aren't they making a move?" Lin Ming glanced at Yin Nuoxing and the other two who were sitting cross-legged inside. That place should be the most eye-catching place. However, there wasn't a single sound coming from it. They're waiting for junior brother Lin Sheng and the others to finish. Zhong Songling smiled. Her slender legs were crossed. Such an alluring scene attracted many gazes. Countless gazes were fixed on Lin Sheng, who was surrounded by the blue flames. They could feel the uniqueness of the flames. Its power shouldn't be comparable to ordinary flames. However, it hadn't reached the level of a divine flame. Perhaps it was some powerful spiritual flame. They didn't know how he was going to deal with that mountain-like pressure. Under the gazes of countless people, Lin Sheng's expression turned grave. The green-blue flames on his body slowly retracted into his palms. A faint chill churned his black eyes as a fierce glint burst forth. Sky Tyrant's seal. In front of Lin Sheng, Bayuya looked at Lin Sheng indifferently. Soon after, the energy between his hands, which had already solidified to the extreme, was suddenly pushed out by him. A low roar resounded across the Battle King stage like a whirlwind. Bang! The huge mysterious seal carried a terrifying and heavy power. It was like Mount Tai was pressing down on Yin Nuoxing from all directions. It broke through the sound barrier in an instant and brought about a shockwave that caused the entire Battle King stage to tremble. Turbid yellow energy exploded. Soon after, 100 feet large dark yellow transparent seal whizzed out. The terrifying pressure made Lin Sheng feel as if he was facing a mountain pressing down on him. The mysterious imprint swept past at a terrifying speed, bringing with it a series of sonic booms. Wherever it passed, the space trembled slightly. The whistling energy was reflected in Lin Sheng's eyes. The heavy pressure caused his robes to flutter, and a suffocating feeling came from all over his body. Huff! A ball of frostfire chi was slowly spat out from Lin Sheng's mouth. Then, his eyes focused, and he suddenly took a step forward. His palms swiftly clapped together, and then he flew out like lightning. Waves of cold chi surged into his left hand, and on his right hand, a green-blue flame spread. The two types of repulsive energy rapidly condensed at the center of his palms. Unknowingly, the ground was covered with a thin layer of ice. However, under his feet, blazing green-blue flames were rolling. The layer of ice was not melted by the flames. This is... Outside the arena, Gu Yu and the rest were similarly astonished when they saw this scene. It's also a top-grade profound technique. Moreover, it seems to be a middle-grade one. It should have been obtained from the Sword God Pavilion. Lin Sheng looked at the frostfire energy that was continuously merging and could not help but laugh. Huh! A low shout came from Lin Sheng's throat. Lin Sheng's hands formed a seal as frost chi and blue flames covered the sky and earth as they gathered at the center of his palms. Soon after, everyone saw a blue hand seal that was dyed with frost chi slowly take shape. On the large hand seal, there were countless obscure pale white symbols. When the frostfire seal was formed, Lin Sheng also felt the energy in his body churning violently. The sharpness in his eyes also became increasingly intense. This was the result of his training the day before yesterday. It was also the first time he had truly used the frostfire seal. It was no longer a ball of chaotic energy, but a complete frostfire seal. Frostfire seal. A low roar suddenly resounded. Lin Sheng's right hand slightly retracted before he suddenly blasted out with his palm. The gigantic green-blue frost-fire palm instantly swept out like a green-blue comet streaking across the sky. It carried a long tail of ice fragments and blazing cold energy as it left a long trail of ice on the Battle King stage. Then, under countless nervous gazes, it heavily collided with the profound, deep yellow seal. Rumble. An earth-shaking collision sound rang out. The several thousand feet wide Battle King stage trembled as if there was an earthquake. The two extremely frightening energies were like ice and fire as they rapidly melted. The energy gales that were stirred up were like a storm as they swept out. Shock waves like ripples streaked across the sky, causing ripples to appear in the surrounding space. Feeling the enormous energy shock wave coming towards him, Baiyu Ye's eyes narrowed. He gently stomped his foot as the demonic chi within his body surged out like a tide, forming an extremely solid energy barrier in front of him. Bang! The energy shock wave violently collided with the energy barrier, causing ripples to rapidly form on it. The entire barrier violently trembled. A moment later, a crack suddenly exploded, causing shock to flash across Baiyu Ye's eyes. Just as he raised his head, he saw that the barrier had loudly shattered, turning into fragments that scattered in all directions. The remaining shock wave also landed on his body. Instantly, his feet brushed against the ground as he flew back, leaving behind 2 long marks on the ground. Crash! He's been forced back. Baiyu has been forced back. Seeing that, Baiyu had been forced back by the shock wave, the surrounding spectators' stands burst into an uproar. On the other side, an even more terrifying energy shock wave roared as it charged towards Lin Sheng under the watchful eyes of countless people. Lin Sheng, who had already changed his hand seals, could not help but bite his lips when he saw this scene. A moment later, his hands suddenly pushed out as a loud shout came from his mouth. Imperial God Diagram. A golden array with mysterious runes suddenly appeared in front of Lin Sheng. However, there were many energy lines that were continuously wriggling and connecting on the array. Clearly, Lin Sheng did not have enough time to display it and was unable to display it perfectly. Just as the golden array appeared, the shock wave arrived unexpectedly and fiercely collided with the array. The frightening energy shook the golden light of the array to the point that it became slightly dimmer. Lin Sheng withstood the enormous energy of the shock wave and was forcefully pushed back. A muffled groan came from his throat. Even with the protection of the golden array, it was unable to completely block off the shock wave. Gotcha! A moment later, the constantly fluctuating golden array finally reached its limit. It shattered with a loud bang, turning into rays of golden light and dissipating. Lin Sheng's figure was completely exposed to the shockwave. Then, the shockwave, which contained a violent force, directly hit him. His body flew backward like a kite with its string cut. It didn't block it. A series of earth-shattering cries erupted from the spectators' stands. Even this could not block it. At the edge, beside Xian, Yi Qinglian saw this scene and clenched her jade-like hands tightly. Mei Mao had a tinge of worry in her eyes. The Imperial God diagram has shattered. Yin Nuoxing saw this scene and could not help but sigh. The Imperial God diagram's rank was at the demigod rank. It was an array that could continuously increase its rank according to one's comprehension. However, the time given to Lin Sheng was too tight. There was not much time for him to completely comprehend the Imperial God diagram. With Lin Sheng's strength, it was difficult for him to fully display its might. However, Yin Nuoxing was not very worried. Under the cloud of dust, there was still a figure standing there. It was not a big deal. Under the intense gazes of countless people, the cloud of dust slowly settled down. A slender figure slowly walked out. His clothes were slightly tattered, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Clearly, even though he had used the Imperial God diagram to block off a large amount of energy, the final blow had still caused him some injuries. The gazes of the entire arena froze. Lin Sheng slowly raised his head and casually wiped the blood at the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand. Then, he looked at Baiyi opposite him and grinned brightly. Let's continue. Chapter 660. The slender figure slowly walked out of the dust-covered area. His clothes were torn and tattered, and he looked to be in a sorry state. However, he was not seriously injured. When the spectators saw him, they could not help but cry out in surprise. Many people had astonishment in their eyes. This little guy is not bad. Yuya's tyrannical emperor's divine technique defeated a demigod. That golden array is a saint art array. It's not a low grade, but this little guy can't unleash his full strength. Saint art arrays can only be fully unleashed when one reaches the level of an array grandmaster. This little guy is only a demigod. It's good enough that he can barely unleash it. Why are you guys so demanding? Why? Are you tempted? Do you want to teach him? We'll see. If he wins today, it's not like I can't teach him a lesson. I'll remember this. If you go back on your word, I'll spread the news. Okay. I'll help you spread the news. You guys, in the sky, the elders were chattering away. If any of the students were to hear their conversation, their jaws would definitely drop to the ground in shock. The elders, who were usually so dignified, were actually fooling around like this. At the edge of the audience, Yi Qinglian's tightly clenched hands relaxed a little. She looked at the smiling young man in the arena and felt a little heartache. Beside her, Xian slowly turned his gaze. Mei Mao froze for a moment, then said softly, "Little Star is about to make his move." Hearing this, Yi Qinglian also turned her gaze and looked at the largest battle monarch platform. She was also curious about Yin Nuoxing. The Imperial God diagram was given to Lin Sheng by the latter to deal with today's battle. Moreover, it was a rare saint art array. This made her even more surprised. How powerful was this guy who gave away a saint art array without batting an eye? After Lin Sheng took the first move and walked out, Yin Nuoxing stood up slowly and stretched her bones. Then, she took a deep breath and said softly, "Come on, let's begin." Seeing him stand up, Xin Yuan and Yin Mo also slowly stood up. The two of them glanced at each other. Then Xin Yuan slowly stepped back and walked to the edge of the battle monarch platform. Clearly, he was leaving the battle to Yin Mo and Yin Nuoxing. Yin Mo's blade-like gaze swept across Yin Nuoxing's body, and his expression slowly darkened. The latter's words and attitude had caused a nameless flame to rise in his heart. This was not the situation he wanted to see. Freshmen were supposed to be crushed by seniors. He should be begging for forgiveness. A mere freshman was actually arrogant to such an extent. Dong! Yin Mo's footsteps landed heavily on the ground, causing the entire Battle Monarch platform to tremble. Terrifying devil chi billowed out like black fog. The powerful devil chi pressure covered the sky and rushed towards Yun Nuashing. Yin Mo's robes fluttered without wind. He clenched his fists, and his eyes were as ferocious as a wild beast. The devil chi that he gathered spread out like ripples, causing the elements in the heavens and earth to slowly fluctuate. Peak of the devil realm. This guy has indeed reached that level. He's not far from the demigod realm. Phew, what a terrifying aura. Senior Yin Mo is about to touch the demigod realm. Can Junior Brother handle it? In the spectator's stands, countless people exclaimed. The commotion spread out like a whirlwind. With such strength, he was indeed able to fight for the top 10 spots on the devil rankings. However, Yin Mo had been busy with his mission and couldn't be bothered with these things. Bring out your full strength. If not, I don't mind letting you know how a freshman should behave in front of a senior. Yin Mo's robes fluttered. His gaze was like a ferocious wolf staring at its prey as he stared at Yun Nuashing. He lowered his head slightly and clenched his fists. He coldly smiled as he stared at Yun Nuashing, killing intent surging in his eyes. If we were on a battlefield, you would already be dead. Yun Nuashing faintly spoke. He didn't release any astral energy, but the light element was already circulating in his body. He didn't have any plans to continue the battle. In a battle of light elements, there would always be an indomitable attack. The clamor in the air suddenly quietened down because of this sentence. Everyone was dumbfounded as they stared at Yun Nuashing. They couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. After that, they turned their gazes over and, as expected, Yin Mo's expression had already turned completely gloomy. They could even feel a heart-palpitating, killing intent condensing from the latter's body. The atmosphere was so tense that even the air seemed to have frozen. Ha! This year's freshmen are indeed arrogant beyond belief. After a long while, Yin Mo suddenly laughed out loud. His wolf-like eyes had now become much more sinister. Those who were familiar with him couldn't help but sigh. Even this lunatic was laughing out loud. That junior was probably in trouble. Just as he finished speaking, Yin Mo's smile suddenly disappeared. His figure moved and shot out like a bolt of lightning. Boundless demonic aura was like a black cloud that covered the sky and earth as it surged towards Yun Nuashing. Within that demonic aura, there was a chilling, killing intent that caused people's hearts to palpitate. Seeing him rushing over like a wild beast and sensing the dense killing intent from his body, Yun Nuashing's eyes turned a little colder. The flowing light element suddenly sped up. After that, faint light particles rapidly appeared around his body and dissipated. Along with them, his figure also disappeared. Bang! Rumble! Suddenly, a dull, thunder-like collision sound rang out. The enormous force shook the Battle King's platform until it was on the verge of shattering. A wave of flames shot up into the sky like a volcanic eruption and engulfed the entire Battle King's platform. Under that fiery red sea of flames, the dense demonic aura was completely submerged in an instant. The terrifying temperature caused the temperature of the entire area to rise abruptly. As the waves of fire swept over, the surrounding students were sweating profusely. What happened? What happened? Junior Brother is missing? At this moment, cries of surprise rang out from the audience. What happened in a short span of less than a second between Yin Mo charging out and the sea of flames erupting? That's light element. The elders in the sky widened their eyes in astonishment. Although they didn't clearly see what had just happened, they had been staring at Yun Nuashing the entire time. He had disappeared in an instant and then appeared in a sea of flames. Their eyes couldn't capture what had just happened. Furthermore, that kind of energy fluctuation that was as brilliant as sunlight, the monstrous sea of flames lasted for more than 10 seconds before slowly dissipating. In that fiery red area, a cloud of smoke slowly appeared, causing everyone to hurriedly turn their gazes over and look at the area where the smoke and dust had filled the air. After waiting for more than 10 seconds, the smoke and dust slowly settled, and the scene inside appeared in front of everyone's eyes. After that, everyone suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. Even the elders in the sky couldn't help but twitch their faces. The sea of flames dissipated, and within the smoke and dust, Yin Nuashing was half-squatting. One of his legs was still hanging behind him, and he was striding very far away. At this moment, his right hand was tightly grabbing Yin Mo's head and pressing him firmly onto the ground. The floor within a 10-foot radius around Yin Mo had cracks as thick as a thumb. That posture was as though Yin Nuashing was running quickly before suddenly stretching out a hand and slapping Yin Mo's face. After that, he fiercely pressed Yin Mo to the ground. Ugh! Yin Mo's face suddenly flushed red. Immediately, he couldn't help but wildly spit out a mouthful of fresh blood onto the slender hand that was grabbing his face. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He didn't sense any signs of danger at all. There were no signs at all. In just an instant, he felt as though the world was spinning. After that, an intense pain came from his head and entire body. Who exactly are you? Yin Mo's eyes widened in astonishment. At this moment, the light in his eyes, which were as ferocious as a ferocious beast, had also dimmed. No matter how unwilling he was to admit that he had lost in the hands of a freshman, he knew that he had been utterly defeated. He didn't even know how Yin Nuashing had attacked. That's why I said that if we were on the battlefield, the one that would fall would be your head. Yin Nuashing sighed softly. The hand that was grabbing Yin Mo's face slowly loosened. He took out a towel from his pendant and gently wiped the blood on his hand. In a cold voice, he said, "I'm just a freshman who likes to drink tea and watch the sun. That's all." Ah, freshman. Hearing this answer, the corner of Yin Mo's mouth forcefully and stiffly curled up into an ugly smile. His eyes slowly closed in exhaustion. His 15th position on the devil rankings had been given to someone else. Furthermore, it was something that he couldn't wait to give up: silence. The clamor in the spectator stands froze in an instant. Everyone's faces were filled with fear and astonishment. Not a single one of them had seen how Yin Nuashing had attacked. All they saw was flames erupting and Yin Mo being instantly killed. Furthermore, it was a complete instant kill. Yin Mo wasn't even able to display his strength. Lin Sheng and Bai Yuya, who were engaged in an intense battle by the side, had just finished their second move. When they saw this scene, both of them were stunned. The former also had an astonished look on his face. Although he felt that it wouldn't be too difficult for Yin Nuashing to deal with Yin Mo and Bai Yuya, since he knew that Yin Mo had a divine-level soul, he had never imagined that it would be so easy. Could that be the light element? In the spectator's stands, Mei Mao's eyes narrowed as her sexy red lips trembled. Although she didn't see how Yin Nuashing had attacked, she was able to guess it. In that instant, she was certain that she didn't feel the fluctuation of an array. The only thing that could achieve such a feat was the fastest element in the world, light. Although she had guessed it, she didn't dare to say it out loud. In the spectator stands, there were also some people who had guessed it was the light element. However, they didn't dare to say it out loud, because in this world, there were too few people who possessed the light element. Almost all of them were gathered in the light temple of the 9 temples. But that sea of flames should be the fire element. Could it be that he had used an array, and I didn't sense it? Mei Mao's eyes flickered. She didn't dare to believe that Yin Nuashing possessed the light element. Furthermore, he had used such a powerful fire element. Therefore, she could only think that he had used some powerful mystic technique to achieve such a feat. When Xian saw this scene, he could only laugh bitterly. It seemed that little star was annoyed. Otherwise, he wouldn't have used the light element. This was a complete suppression. Xin Yuan didn't have the time to care about the complicated feelings outside the arena. He could only feel a mountain-like pressure pressing down on his body. He couldn't even see how Yin Mo had fallen. Not caring if anyone had guessed what kind of power he had used, Yin Nuashing slowly raised his head. His slightly cold eyes had also returned to normal at this moment. Lightly inhaling a breath of air, he looked towards Xin Yuan and indifferently said, "Continue." Xin Yuan's face twitched. When he saw Yin Mo's miserable end, He couldn't help but mourn for him for 2 seconds. When he heard Yin Mo's words, he couldn't help but feel bitter in his heart. He wanted to stop the fight, but he couldn't bring himself to do so. It was the two of them who had issued the challenge. Moreover, they were freshmen. If he were to say stop the fight now, he wouldn't be able to lose his face in the future. A senior at the peak of the demon rank was scared to the point that he lost all will to fight in front of freshmen and admitted defeat. Such words would probably spread out. If he were to continue the fight, would Yin Nuoxing deal with him like how he dealt with Yin Mo? Would he be instantly killed without even being able to see anything? This situation was really awkward after struggling for a long time. Xin Yuan took a deep breath and reluctantly walked forward. Then, he cupped his hands and cupped them towards Yin Nuoxing. He said in a deep voice, "Junior, please enlighten me." When they saw this, the audience burst into an uproar. Chapter 661. Just as Xin Yuan's voice fell, the elements between heaven and earth suddenly became chaotic. The power of heaven and earth whistled like a hurricane, bringing along a dull sound around Xin Yuan. Xin Yuan suddenly clapped his hands together. After a brief moment, a peculiar seal was rapidly changing. Following the execution of the seal, everyone could suddenly feel that the boundless energy of heaven and earth that had gathered in this world was violently boiling like boiling water at this moment and poured into Xin Yuan's hands from all directions. Along with the terrifying amount of energy pouring in, Xin Yuan's hands suddenly flickered with a faint reddish-black radiance. A killing intent abruptly gushed out from his body. His pair of black eyes had completely turned black at this moment, as if they were pitch-black voids. Only the two pupils were scarlet in the color of blood. This is the Abyss Divine Art. Ding Mingyu's eyes slightly narrowed at this moment. The Abyss Divine Art was Xin Yuan's trump card. It was said that its grade was between top grade and immortal grade. Even if it was a demigod grade, it was also a profound art that he used to risk his life. It could harm himself by injuring 800 to injure 1,000 enemies. Perhaps others might not be able to see anything, but they could feel the energy that was rampaging from Xin Yuan's body. Soon after, their expressions became grave. This terrifying energy made everyone feel extremely pressured. Xin Yuan did not pay attention to those gazes and only used all his strength to execute this terrifying, profound art. The enormous pressure caused some cold sweat to appear on his forehead, and the reddish-black killing intent that was emitted from his body became even denser at this moment. When he saw that Yin Nuoxing did not rush over to interrupt him, he breathed a sigh of relief. If the latter were to interrupt him, he might even be seriously injured. Yin Nuoxing slightly raised her head, looked at Xin Yuan, who was like a spring that was constantly spewing reddish-black spring water, and lightly inhaled a breath of air. This tyrannical killing intent also existed in her body. Those were two ominous weapons. God knows how many people's blood they had drunk in order to leave such a dense killing intent on them. Now that she saw that Xin Yuan's profound art could also emit such a terrifying killing intent, she was also a little interested. "Senior, are you planning to go all out?" Yin Nuoxing crossed her hands in front of her and smiled faintly as she sensed the murderous aura brushing past her. Seeing him smile, Xin Yuan was also startled. From the moment Yin Nuoxing appeared until now, this was the first time he smiled. Just now, his expression was as if someone owed him money. His face was dark, but now that he saw that somewhat charming face smile, he actually felt a little stunned. But a moment later, she slapped herself in her heart. This was a man. I'm not an idiot like that. Regardless of whether it's a new student or a senior, those with strength are experts. Since you're able to stand at the top 20 of the devil rankings, it naturally proves that you're also an expert with strength. Moreover, you should be a fellow that's as strong as a monster. In that case, you also have the qualifications to make me go all out, and I have to go all out. Xin Yuan grinned, and the reddish-black light emitted from his body became increasingly dense. His hands danced, leaving behind afterimages. The energy that filled the sky was like a tidal wave that unceasingly gushed over, and finally, all of it gushed into his hands. As the energy in his hands condensed to the extreme, his hands also underwent a transformation. One of his hands was holding onto a fiery red energy, while the other hand was holding onto a black hole-like killing intent. The energy that was contained within made Ding Mingyu feel a great threat. Hearing that, Yin Nuoxing faintly nodded her head. She slowly stretched out her right hand, and the energy of stars surged, gushing out from her palm. In just a short moment, it condensed into a gigantic sword made of stars. It was like a starry sky, and the 6 curled wings on her back that were like a screen also gradually spread out to a size of 10 feet. Lightly inhaling a breath of air, Yin Nuoxing rotated her wrist and tightly grasped the gigantic sword in her hand. Her arm lightly trembled, and shortly after, the countless energy in the heavens and earth became chaotic. The people in the spectator stand were even shocked to discover that their connection with the energy of heaven and earth had been severed. No, it wasn't severed. It was that the energy of heaven and earth within the range that they could sense was being dominated by another person. It was as though a ferocious beast had opened its huge mouth, devouring all the energy, this destructive energy. How can a Devil Realm expert possess such strength? Ding Mingyu and Mei Mao stared at the gigantic sword made of stars in Yin Nuoxing's hand in astonishment. She was somewhat shocked in her heart. This energy had already exceeded the scope of a Devil Realm expert. This was absolutely not something that could be achieved by a so-called top-grade, profound technique. Thinking up to here, her beautiful eyes slightly widened. If a top-grade profound technique couldn't do it, then what about an immortal-grade profound technique? Seeing her astonished appearance, Jun Luo Yi's red lips also slightly curled up. Mei Mao was suffused with extraordinary splendor as she looked down at Yin Nuoxing, who was being closely watched by everyone. She had already seen the latter's strength in the mystic dragon continent. According to her thoughts, if it wasn't for him having misgivings about being in the academy and his own identity and being unable to use all of his strength, he should be the strongest person in the Farlight Academy. Xian Yuan's gaze also slightly trembled. He could feel that a portion of the energy of heaven and earth that he had mobilized had gone out of control and was being absorbed by Yin Nuoxing. He couldn't help but raise his head, seeing the gigantic sword made of stars that was unceasingly condensing energy in Yin Nuoxing's hand. The corner of his eyes also slightly twitched. This energy, however, he recovered his calm in an instant. Soon after, under the attentive gazes of everyone, his palms that were joined together suddenly tore apart in front of him. Along with the movement of his hands, the space in front of him was suddenly torn apart, and a 10-meter-long spatial crack was suddenly torn open, just like the mouth of an abyss, tearing apart space. Xian Yuan is able to display an attack that's equivalent to an initial God Realm expert. Seeing that gigantic spatial crack, everyone fiercely sucked in a mouthful of cold air, tearing apart space. That's a power that only an initial God Realm expert possessed. However, Xian Yuan was only at the peak of the Devil Realm. In other words, this attack of his was comparable to an attack of an initial God Realm expert. Abyssal God Technique, Abyssal Break. As Xian Yuan tore open the space, his face rapidly turned red. With a stern cry, his right hand suddenly slammed towards the huge spatial crack. Waves of ripples appeared in the empty space at this moment. The sky seemed to have turned into the surface of a calm lake as it continued to churn with waves. Bang! The surface of the water suddenly became violent, and that 10-meter-long spatial crack also expanded to a length of 10,000 meters under the astonished gazes of countless people. It tore apart the tranquil lake's surface, and then shot out like an arrow, leaving a long and gigantic black crack in the space as it explosively rumbled towards Yin Nuoxing. Gigantic spatial cracks unceasingly opened up in the space, and it was as if a peerless sharp sword had cut through the space, rushing towards Yin Nuoxing. That enormous power made the entire Battle Monarch platform tremble violently, and even the ground cracked open. Seeing that the Battle Monarch platform couldn't withstand that power, everyone was even more certain that this attack had already reached the level of a Divine Sun expert. The Battle Monarch platform could withstand an all-out attack from a Divine Sun expert without shattering. But at this moment, cracks had appeared on it. The Battle Monarch platform was trembling, but Yun Nuoxing's figure didn't move at all. He slightly raised his head, looking at the abyssal crack that was rushing towards him, and lightly sucked in a breath of air. The gigantic sword that was constantly gathering energy in his hand also quietly froze. Both of his hands slowly grasped the gigantic sword, and then gently raised it above his head. At this moment, all of the energy in his body was poured into the starry sword without any reservation. Buzz! A destructive buzzing sound resounded throughout the Battle Monarch platform. Yun Nuoxing's multicolored eyes had a trace of a faint smile, but after a moment, it faintly condensed. At this moment, the starry sword also erupted with a terrifying aura that soared into the sky. It was as if a star field had bloomed in front of it, causing the sky and earth to darken. Netherworld ruins? Firmament slash. A low shout came out of Yun Nuoxing's mouth. Shortly after, he suddenly took a step forward, and the starry sword in his hand also violently slammed down at this moment. Rumble! The starry sword radiance that was tens of thousands of feet in size, with a trace of faint destructive energy, landed on the Battle Monarch platform. Then, it suddenly expanded to 100,000 feet in size. The earth-shattering sword aura and the wild and violent energy tore a huge crack in the Battle King platform. The entire Battle King platform began to crumble at this moment. Soon after, the sword aura charged forward in front of countless shocked gazes. It was accompanied by an energy that could destroy the world as it heavily collided with the huge crack that was charging towards it. At the moment of collision, the entire world seemed to have quieted down. Everyone looked at this scene in shock. Before they could even blink, an extremely terrifying energy shock wave had already swept out like a storm. Swoosh! However, just as the energy storm was about to engulf the audience, over a dozen figures suddenly appeared at the edge of the Battle Monarch platform. Subsequently, they joined hands, and waves of vast and mighty energy gushed out. Together, they formed a huge energy barrier that enveloped the entire Battle Monarch platform. These dozen people were the elders who were watching from the sky. Rumble! An earth-shaking rumble suddenly sounded like a thunderstorm, and an extremely dazzling light suddenly blossomed on the Battle Monarch platform. Soon after, 100,000 feet large energy storm unfurled. It was accompanied by waves of wild and violent energy shock waves that swept out in all directions, violently smashing against the energy barrier, causing ripples to rapidly form on the barrier. However, no cracks appeared. From this, one could see how tough this barrier was. The energy storm lasted for a minute before slowly dissipating. After half a minute, the Battle Monarch platform finally quieted down. In the audience, everyone hurriedly stretched their necks and looked at the Battle Monarch platform that had been destroyed. They could not help but inwardly suck in a breath of cold air. The Battle Monarch platform has been shattered. Isn't it said to be able to withstand an all-out attack from a god sun? Seeing the cracks spreading out like a spider web, the Battle Monarch platform that had caved in, and some of the floorboards that had been blown away and turned into dust, the audience could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. Their gazes swept towards the slender black-clothed youth, and their cheeks twitched violently. In other words, the attacks of these two people had already reached the level of a god sun. Or perhaps, the strength of that slender figure was already extraordinary. "Where's Senior Xin Yuan?" All of a sudden, a voice sounded from the audience. Soon after, everyone's gazes abruptly turned towards the place where the smoke and dust still lingered. As everyone focused their gazes, the smoke and dust in that area gradually dissipated. In the end, under everyone's gazes, Xin Yuan's figure gradually appeared. However, the current Xin Yuan did not seem to have suffered any injuries other than his slightly pale complexion. He was only coughing out mouthfuls of blood. That was the backlash from forcefully using the abyssal divine art. Seeing that Xian Yuan was safe and sound, a wave of astonished whispers sounded from the audience. That sword strike from before was able to sink the Battle Monarch platform. With Xian Yuan's strength, he shouldn't be unscathed. Just as everyone was puzzled, the smoke and dust in that area finally completely dissipated. As the smoke and dust settled, the figure of a young man appeared within the smoke and happened to be 3 feet in front of Xian Yuan. Elder Yin Feng. A series of exclamations sounded from the audience when they saw the young man. At this moment, Yin Feng maintained his posture where his hand was stretched out. From the huge sword pit in front of him, it seemed that the netherworld void slash had been blocked by him. No wonder Xian Yuan was not injured. That sword glow should have been enough to turn the ladder into ashes. A gentle breeze blew over, causing his clothes to flutter. Only at this moment did Yin Feng retract his trembling hand. Some joy and astonishment flashed across his black eyes. After which, under everyone's gazes, he snorted softly. His gaze swept towards Yun Nuoxing, who was still maintaining her sword strike posture, as he softly scolded, "Stinking brat, do you want to destroy this place?" His long bangs blocked Yun Nuoxing's vision. However, from the way his body was trembling and his chest was rapidly rising and falling, it seemed that it was very strenuous for him. A moment later, the starlight sword in his hand slowly dissipated. His body knelt on the ground, with his hands gently supporting himself. It seemed that he had exhausted all his strength. The netherworld void slash would draw 90% of one's strength. Although he didn't use a divine artifact, it would still draw 90% of one's strength if there was no restriction. Therefore, he had used all his strength in this attack. While everyone was stunned by the shattered Battle King platform, a beautiful figure swiftly flew across the sky from the edge of the spectator stands. She swiftly landed in front of Yin Nuoxing like a fairy. She slowly squatted down and gently supported the ladder with her jade-like hands. "Are you all right?" Ziyin softly asked as she gently wrapped her jade-like hands around his waist and supported him. When she saw his exhausted appearance, some heartache flashed across her beautiful eyes. Yin Nuoxing hurriedly panted a few times. Then, he bitterly smiled and shook his head. 90% of his strength had been drawn away. He couldn't even stand properly. How could he be all right? You reap what you sow. You're so serious even in a small spar. Seeing this, Ziyin helplessly sighed. Then, she gently stood up and cupped her hands towards Yin Feng. She said, "Elder Yin Feng will be returning first." After she finished speaking, she didn't wait for Yin Feng's reply. She wrapped her arms around Yun Nuoxing's legs and back and directly lifted him up. Then, she quickly flew towards the freshman area, leaving behind a bunch of envious and jealous gazes. Seeing this, Yin Feng couldn't help but smile. He felt that this scene wasn't too harmonious. A long while later, Xian Yuan finally returned to his senses and stood up with great difficulty. However, Yin Nuoxing's figure was no longer on the Battle Master stage. He couldn't help but bitterly smile as he cupped his hands towards Yin Feng and said, "Thank you, Elder." Hearing this, Yin Feng casually waved his hand. Then, he turned his gaze towards the other Battle Master stage. Over there, the battle between Lin Sheng and Baiyu Ye had also ended. According to what was said earlier, the latter had 2 attacks and 1 defense. Lin Sheng had withstood all of them with great difficulty. Therefore, according to the rules, it was Lin Sheng's victory. After the battle ended, Yi Qinglian hurriedly got off the stage and hugged Lin Sheng. As she looked at his handsome and pale face, her heart ached. Then, she hugged him and turned into a ray of light. Under countless amazed gazes, she flew out of the Battle Master stage and quickly disappeared. "I've lost. How can there be such a powerful monster?" Xian Yuan let out a long sigh. He looked at Yin Mo, who was lying beside him, and bitterly smiled. "It's a lesson for me to teach you. However, it's also a good thing that you've admitted your loss. That brat is not simple. The Farlight Academy is not his stage. Due to some special reasons, he has come here. It's very normal for you to lose. In fact, it can't be any more normal. Why don't you say that I'm surprised that you've won?" Yin Feng said with a smile. He even bluntly attacked Xian Yuan, causing the latter to bitterly smile even more. Chapter 662. The battle on the Battle King platform finally came to an end amidst the exclamations of shock and admiration. That heavily damaged platform seemed to be a perfect example of the destructive power of that battle. However, the battle on the platform could only be described with the word bitter. A total of 2 moves, one was heavily injured, one suffered a backlash, and one was completely exhausted. It felt as though they were fighting with their lives on the line. However, this also caused the voices that doubted Yin Nuoxing's strength to vanish. There were many people who watched the battle that day. That astral sword beam was sufficient to blast a low-level deity into smithereens. The destruction of the Battle King platform was a very good example, shocking many people. Even those famous characters on the devil rankings felt their hearts trembling. And on the other battle stage, Lin Sheng and Bai Yuya had only exchanged 3 blows, but had quietly ended amidst the resounding cheers. From today onwards, perhaps Lin Sheng and that nameless new student would gradually enter the sights of everyone in the Far Light Academy. A half-devil could forcefully resist 2 attacks from Bai Yuya, who was on the 9 Seals devil path. In the end, he even unleashed a 9th-grade devil-ranked formation, causing both sides to be heavily injured, shocking everyone present. Such perverse strength caused everyone to silently applaud. For a half-devil to be able to achieve such a feat, it was truly inconceivable. With such strength, Bai Yuya could even contend for a spot on the devil rankings. Naturally, Bai Yuya was also a publicly acknowledged expert on the devil rankings. Although Lin Sheng did his best and caused both sides to be heavily injured, the former's strength was still stronger than the latter. There was no need to doubt this. However, Bai Yuya was a senior after all. He had already cultivated in the Far Light Academy for a total of 5 years. Who knew if Lin Sheng would be able to surpass him in 5 more years? The ending of the battle brought about a long-lasting effect, far more far-reaching than the new student examination. Just like what Ding Mingyu and Yin Nuoxing said back then, he could no longer be a transparent person. Also, his fame would be much greater because of this. Regardless of whether he was willing or not, everything that happened here had already been engraved in the minds of everyone. In that case, Godchild used 2 moves, not 1 or 5 moves. How should we calculate this? Under a pine tree on a mountain peak, 2 young men were playing chess on a chessboard. One of them thought of a bet and couldn't help but chuckle. He casually placed a chess piece and said, "Let's call it a draw. Both of us will send a portion over." The other young man glanced at him and said, Yin Feng suddenly flipped the chessboard over, causing 2 more veins to pop out on Bing's forehead. After that, he laughed. Godchild is already ranked number 4 on the devil rankings. Shouldn't we do something as well? Express my gratitude? What did it mean? What was the reward? The Son of God's divine weapons are better than ours. Even if we sell those high-level ones, we won't be able to get the same price. However, I can give you pills and magic circles as you wish. Bing Qing looked up, tidying up the chessboard, and said, That's not it. Didn't you see that the Son of God became more active after the battle that day? In the past, he would hide in his palace and not go out. When he went out, he would run deep into the mountains and forests. Moreover, the moment he left the palace, he would put on a mask. Now, he doesn't even wear one anymore. It seems like he isn't hiding his identity anymore. Yin Feng smiled. The Son of God's identity was exposed once during the Taiyuan martial meeting. However, those who know about the Taiyuan martial meeting are all major powers and transcendental existences in the myriad gods world. How could those people send their disciples to this small divine great academy? Although some of the students in the academy have some background, they still won't be able to come in contact with people of that level. Perhaps they have heard of his name before, but they might not be able to recognize him. Bing rolled his eyes and then narrowed his eyes again. Speaking of which, what you said just now, is there any other meaning? His 2 younger sisters are here. The Son of God is running all over the place. Isn't it because of them? Do you think we should, Yin Feng blinked his eyes and smiled like an old fox. I asked around a little. I heard that he took a fancy to the Saint Devil chessboard. It's 23 million energy value. It's a strange item, being said indifferently. The fourth on the Devil ranking gives him 150,000 energy value every day. Those below 30 get 10,000 energy value. Even so, it will take a long time. That's why the Son of God has been busy these days. He entered the lava and went to do missions. The rank 9 war god order gave him a lot of space to do. Yin Feng sighed softly. After tidying up the chessboard, he began to play again. However, after 5 days, he only collected 3 million energy value. Some of the missions with high energy value are worth 1 million. With the Son of God's ability, it shouldn't be a problem for him to do 10 missions a day. Why? Bing was surprised. The method is wrong. Moreover, the missions with high energy value won't always be put out unless it's really difficult to complete. Yin Feng shook his head and said, "Let's wait and see. We can't interfere as we wish. Although half of this academy belongs to the 9 divine temples, it doesn't completely belong to the 9 divine temples." After placing down a chess piece, Bing turned his head to look at the sky and said softly. In the days after the battle, Yin Nuoxing had been running outside with Xian and the 2 girls. He wasn't injured in the battle, but he was exhausted. With his body's condition, it would take less than half an hour to recover. Although he knew that this battle would cause a big commotion and his plan of being invisible would completely fail, Yer had taken a fancy to the Saint Devil chessboard. Therefore, no matter what the commotion was, he would go out and cause a ruckus. Compared to Yin Nuoxing's ruckus, Lin Sheng and Yi Qinglian were very well behaved and hid in their own attic. After recuperating, they didn't go out and cause trouble. They cultivated quietly, and their strength seemed to have improved. When they had nothing to do, they would go to the former's palace. However, it was rare to see them. I'm saving up energy value to buy something. No more, no less. It's exactly 23 million. I've already saved up to 5 million. During this hurried meeting, Yin Nuoxing chatted with Lin Sheng and Yi Qinglian for a while. However, this sentence made the 2 of them a little speechless. However, they didn't ask what he wanted to buy. This amount of energy value was for beginner god level items. They just listened to him. "We have 2 million here. Look." Lin Sheng took out his token. The 7-digit red number on it looked quite imposing. Yi Qinglian also hurriedly took out her token. Their tokens added up to nearly 3 million, but most of them were obtained during the freshman assessment. Lin Sheng had obtained a 9th grade magic array from Yin Nuoxing. He had also borrowed the demigod level energy array and various other things for a long time. He felt that he owed him a lot and hoped that he could be of some help at this time. TSK, TSK, TSK. Yin Nuoxing blinked. Then he looked at the 2 tokens with disdain and said disdainfully, 2 million energy value. You'll get it after doing a few missions. You can keep it to pay the rent. His current delicate appearance and actions made him look very playful. It made people unable to get angry. Lin Sheng and Yi Qinglian also looked at each other silently. They knew that Yin Nuoxing wouldn't want their energy value, nor did he need them to return the favor. However, even though they knew, they still felt a little apologetic. Keep it and cultivate slowly. I have to go somewhere. After chatting for a while, Yin Nuoxing waved his hand and smiled faintly at the 2 of them. Then, he left the palace with Xian and the other 2 girls and flew into the distance. This guy is also very busy. I suddenly have a very strong impulse. Looking in the direction Yin Nuoxing and the others disappeared, Lin Sheng sighed and couldn't help but laugh. Mei Mao raised her head slightly and glanced at him. She said mischievously, "What? Do you want to spar with him? Let me say this first. I won't help you heal. This, forget it. We'll talk about it later. I'm going out too." Lin Sheng's smile froze. After a while, he let out a dry laugh and waved at Yi Qinglian. Then, he quickly kissed her delicate face and rushed into the sky, leaving behind Yi Qinglian, who was stunned by his sneak attack. Scoundrel! Yi Qinglian's face was red with embarrassment. She couldn't help but caress her cheeks. Seeing him disappear from her sight, she sighed and slowly walked back to the pavilion. Outside a bamboo forest in the academy, Yin Nuashing and the other three landed. Outside the bamboo forest, a slender and alluring figure had her back against the bamboo. Her jade-like legs were bent as she stepped on the bamboo behind her. Her bright eyes would sweep across her surroundings from time to time. When she saw them appear, the fairy-like girl suddenly smiled. She put down her jade-like legs without leaving a trace. Her jade-like hands were crossed in front of her as she stood gracefully. Luo, is something the matter? Yin Nuashing looked at the girl who was as beautiful as a priestess and smiled faintly. The girl also smiled back at him. Jun Luo smiled sweetly and didn't say anything. Mei Mao paused on Yin Nuashing for a while. Then, she turned around and walked into the bamboo forest. Although Yin Nuashing was a little confused, she didn't ask anything. She waved her hand and led Xian and the others into the bamboo forest. They were very close to each other. It was the kind of distance between friends. They didn't have the slightest bit of defense. After walking for about 10 minutes in the quiet bamboo forest, a quiet house suddenly appeared. At this moment, there was a beautiful woman in a silver dress standing gracefully before the door to the house. Her ink-black hair fluttered with the wind, and her entire body emanated a chilly aura. She was like a snow lotus that stood proudly on a snowy mountain. Senior Sister Mingyu. Jun Luo, called out softly to the girl in the silver dress. After a long while, Jun Luo, called out again. Only then did the woman slowly turn around. Under her silver dress, she wrapped her exquisite and voluptuous body. Her pretty face that was dyed with frost was currently somewhat indifferent. Although this was not the first time Yin Nuashing had seen her, every time he saw her, he felt that this girl was truly too cold. No, it should be said that she was too indifferent. There was a feeling that she did not care about anything, which made him feel a sense of familiarity. However, he felt that it wasn't wrong to be cold. If this face could often smile, it would charm countless people to death. However, this pretty face didn't seem to know what a smile was. But this also had her unique flavor. It was indeed extremely beautiful. Senior Sister Ding. Yin Nuashing nodded toward the girl and said, I heard that you are accumulating energy values. I have a god-level mission here. After completing it, there will be 12 million energy values. I need some manpower. Are you interested? Ding Mingyu nodded indifferently and went straight to the point, as if she didn't even want to say anything. What mission? Yin Nuashing was taken aback by this sudden serious talk, but he quickly composed himself. These past few days of crazily doing missions had given him some information. The Farlight Academy would release a large number of missions, so large that it was close to being endless. Every mission would be marked with a corresponding level of strength. Demigod level was a mission that required a demigod level expert or a demigod level expert to handle. If a demigod-level expert wanted to accept a mission, they would basically need to form a team. As for god level, it required strength comparable to a demigod-level expert. As for his rank 9 war god token, he could accept all kinds of missions. Even god-level missions were no exception. Ding Mingyu cast her gaze towards Jun Luo. The latter was slightly taken aback, but soon after, she nodded and said softly, There is a huge underground maze under Sunrise City. It is said that this maze is endless and is as large as several cities. Moreover, its depth is immeasurable. There are also some terrifying things mixed within. The experts of Sunrise City and the surrounding cities have been exploring this underground maze for several tens of thousands of years without any clear progress. This god-level mission is to explore this underground maze. Yin Nuashing raised his eyebrows and said, Exploration-type mission? I have never done it before. How can this mission be considered complete? You have to explore an unknown area or discover something new in the maze. Jun Luo smiled. Yin Nuashing muttered to himself. An underground maze, it sounded a little strange. Especially now, he still had some lingering fear towards this underground thing. However, when he thought of the 12 million energy values, if he completed it together with Xian, that would be 24 million energy values. It was enough to buy the Saint Demonic chessboard. 24 million energy values are equivalent to 40 advanced demonic level missions. A maze is a little traumatized. However, I have many ways to escape. A mission that can be done once and for all is not bad. Since that's the case, I don't care if it's the earth or the sky. Even if it's the void, I have to explore it. After pondering for a long time and pretending to count with his fingers, Yin Nuashing raised his head and asked, "How many people do you need in total?" 8 people. Luo, yeah, and the 3 people Lin Gong. One more will be here soon. There are only 2 spots left, Ding Mingyu said indifferently. The size of a small team. Yin Nuashing calculated the number of people and nodded casually. Seeing him nod, Ding Mingyu also nodded slightly. Just as she was about to say something, a soft sound came from outside the bamboo forest, causing everyone to turn their heads. Then they saw a young man slowly walking in from outside the bamboo forest on bamboo leaves. When they saw the person who had come, Yin Nuashing and Xian were slightly startled. Why was it him? The person who had just walked in was also stunned when he saw the few pairs of eyes looking at him. Why is it you guys? Chapter 663. The person who had arrived was a tall and slender young man with a head of black hair and 2 blue hair rings tied around his temples. He was a handsome young man. He looked like Lin Sheng, who had just parted with Yin Nuashing and the others not long ago. Why are you guys here? Could it be? Lin Sheng looked at Ding Mingyu in surprise, then at Yin Nuashing and the others. He let out a dry laugh. Ding Mingyu nodded slightly when she saw Lin Sheng. She then said softly, "I invited all of you here. It seems like you guys know each other. That's even more appropriate." Lin Sheng smiled bitterly when he saw this. Ding Mingyu had told him about the exploration mission not long after the battle. When he heard about the huge amount of energy required, he hesitated for a while before agreeing. Today, he had come to meet the other 2 people mentioned by Ding Mingyu. He hadn't expected it to be Yin Nuashing and Xian. I didn't expect it to be the 2 of you. I thought it would be the other seniors. No, it's actually quite normal. Lin Sheng was stunned for a while. Then, he couldn't help but laugh. Yin Nuashing shrugged helplessly. She then looked at Ding Mingyu and nodded. "Okay, when do we set off?" "Since you guys don't have any problems, it's decided. We'll set off tomorrow. We'll need 1 or 2 days to travel. The entrance is in the east of Xiaoguang City. We'll meet at the stone platform in front of the entrance." Ding Mingyu nodded gently. Yin Nuashing, Lin Sheng, and the others nodded as well. This time, they had to leave the High Light Academy. Yin Nuashing felt a little relaxed, but not by much because there were still people from the academy following them. Lin Sheng, on the other hand, was a little curious. Ever since he entered the High Light Academy, he had not left. He was very curious about what Xiaoguang City was like, and what was the difference between it and the small city back home. After chatting with Ding Mingyu for a while, other than the fact that Yin Nuashing refused to say his name no matter what, they were more familiar with each other. This quiet bamboo forest seemed to be her private place, and the few of them could not stay for long. They cupped their hands and bid farewell, and Jun Luo also sent them to the door. Before leaving, Yin Nuashing wrinkled her little nose, took a step forward, and pulled Jun Luo, saying softly, "You didn't tell anyone about my identity, right? Does Mr. Yin not trust this little girl?" Jun Luo smiled, quickly winking Mei Mao at him. Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes. However, this smart woman also knew what to say and what not to say. He was just asking, as usual, to reassure her. "So, I'm afraid the reason you're looking for us isn't just for the mission, right?" Yin Nuashing asked. Hearing this, Jun Luo smiled sweetly. She put her hands behind her back, stood on her tiptoes, and drew a very slender curve with her delicate body. She moved closer to his ear and said with a smile, "It's because of the mission. Star Sovereign Nuashing is very safe and reliable. Others may not know, but this little girl knows, Mr. Divine Physique." Yin Nuashing's ears turned numb from the orchid fragrance. His body trembled slightly, and he rolled his eyes. He couldn't help but reach out and flick his finger on her smooth forehead. He snorted softly and said, "Stupid girl, if you dare to say it, I'll spank you." Mr. Yin really doesn't know how to be gentle with women. Jun Luo he rubbed her forehead and said. Jun Luo, he rubbed her forehead and muttered. Her bright and beautiful eyes flashed with a hint of craftiness, causing Yun Nuoxing to laugh bitterly. Did this girl treat him as a protective talisman? Then it's settled. Mr. Yun, you have to protect us well. Jun Luo, he smiled sweetly. Her smile was somewhat gentle. It was completely different from the strong aura she had when Yun Nuoxing first met her. It seemed that after coming to this new world, they had also changed slightly. In the distance, Lin Sheng saw Yun Nuoxing and Jun Luo talking very intimately. He also looked at them in surprise. Then, he turned his head to look at Xian curiously. In the end, he only saw her looking at the former with a gentle expression. Her gentleness was like water. His heart was moved when he saw it. Wah, big brother's messing around again. Big sister Xian, aren't you going to go and take care of him? Little Yu Yu's hand hooked around Xian's arm as she raised her head with a grin. She looked at the latter and said. Hearing this, Xian gently smiled. Her jade-like hands rubbed Yun Nuoxing's head. Her beautiful eyes were still filled with tenderness and love as she looked at Yun Nuoxing. It was as if she did not care about his relationship with other girls. After a few minutes, Yun Nuoxing walked back. When he walked back, he was still muttering something. His expression was helpless and angry, as if he had been betrayed and was counting the money for him. Brother Yun, I'll go back first. I have to say goodbye to Qing Lian. See you tomorrow, Lin Sheng said with a smile. Lin Sheng said with a smile. When Yun Nuoxing also smiled and nodded, he quickly rushed towards the dormitory area. Yun Nuoxing heaved a sigh of relief. He stomped his foot on the ground, and a formation suddenly opened. Then it disappeared. When they came back to their senses, the scene had changed. At this moment, they were already back in the palace. If he wasn't afraid of scaring Lin Sheng, he would have directly brought him back. It's about time to tell us what the Saint Demonic chessboard is, right? After brewing a pot of tea, Yun Nuoxing gulped down 2 mouthfuls. Then, he could not help but ask. He had been on the move for the past few days and did not ask what the Saint Demonic chessboard, which was worth 23 million energy points, was. The Saint Demonic chessboard. It's the Saint Demonic chessboard. As for what it is, when Brother Yin gets his hands on it, Ewer will tell you in detail, because I'm not sure if the Saint Demonic chessboard is that thing. On the sofa, Ewer smiled gently. Then, she threw herself into Yun Nuoxing's arms and acted coquettishly. That soft and delicate body scurried around in Yun Nuoxing's arms, causing his eyes to flicker slightly. However, his mood did not change much. He was already used to it. At first, she was hugging Lil Ming, then Yi. Now, yes, she was already a big girl, but she still liked to hug him. Was he a doll? Then, you two will stay here obediently for the next few days, or do you want me to send you back to Big Sister Jean? Yun Nuoxing rubbed Ewer in her arms. Then, she looked up at Little Moon and smiled. Can't we go together? Little Moon winked at Mei Mao. Then, she smiled and sat down close to Yun Nuoxing. Yun Nuoxing shook her head and said, It's not that you can't. Although the mission is limited to 8 people, you and Ewer are not students of the academy. It's not a big deal for you to come along. Anyway, I can protect you. I'm just afraid that you two will be afraid of the underground or something. It's probably dark there. It's not fun, Yun Nuoxing said with a smile. Big brother is the sun. What's there to be afraid of? Little Moon chuckled and leaned her head on Yun Nuoxing's right shoulder. Xian also chuckled and sat down, leaning on Yun Nuoxing's left shoulder. Ewer curled up into a small ball and sat on Yun Nuoxing's lap. She chuckled at him. Say, what do you take me for? Seeing the 3 girls sitting in such a strange position, Yun Nuoxing's heartbeat quickened. She could not help but laugh bitterly. What was this? Were they trying to seduce him? Xian, Ewer, and Little Moon looked at each other. Then, they laughed in unison and said, Doll. Very good. You won. I lost. Yun Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. At night, Yin Feng and Bing came to the palace and gave him a large pile of bottles. Inside the bottles were pills that were full of spirituality, and their grades were not low. At the very least, they were all above the immortal grade. The divinity elixir can help you increase the success rate of breaking through to the initial god level by 30%. The light source elixir can purify divinity. The 100 transformations spiritual light elixir can be used on elements and can give them a strong spirituality. As for what element it is, you have to choose it yourself. The vast divine elixir can be used to save a person's last breath. However, that being said, it probably doesn't have much of an effect on experts above the King of Hell. The extreme divine elixir can condense divinity. Yin Feng placed a bunch of things in Yun Nuoxing's hands. At the same time, he introduced them to her. Then he smiled and said, "Originally, we wanted to celebrate the Godchild's ranking as the 4th on the devil rankings. However, there's nothing to celebrate, so we found these things. Actually, these are the things that I lost to being in the bet." Ha ha! Hearing that laughter, Yun Nuoxing could not help but roll her eyes. After chatting for a while, Yin Feng also left something for Little Moon and Binger before leaving. The next day, Lin Sheng climbed out of bed at dawn. He quickly tidied himself up and stood at the top of the pavilion. Beside him, the girl was slim and elegant. Her clear eyes looked at him peacefully. Last night, Lin Sheng had already told Yi Qinglian that he was going to Dingming Yu and Yun Nuoxing to do the mission. Although Yi Qinglian knew, she was reluctant to part with them for a period of time. "I'm leaving. Wait for me at home obediently." Lin Sheng walked to the girl and gently stroked her hair with a smile. Yi Qinglian softly acknowledged. She reached out her hand and helped Lin Sheng tidy up his clothes. The girl was as gentle as a little wife, causing Lin Sheng's eyes to be filled with affection. "When I'm not around, remember to rest on time. Eat meat when you're hungry and wear more clothes when you're cold. Don't torture yourself." Lin Sheng reached out and scratched her little nose as he gently said, "I know. Stop being so wishy-washy." Yi Qinglian wrinkled her little nose and coquettishly complained. Seeing this, Lin Sheng smiled and did not say anything else. With a wave of his hand, his figure flew towards the center of the High Light Academy under Yi Qinglian's gaze. The High Light Academy was very big. According to the speed of an ordinary devil-class expert, it would take him half a day to fly out. Perhaps because of this factor, there were a few small teleportation doors in the center of the academy. One of them led to the huge stone platform at the entrance. However, it still took Lin Sheng 2 hours to fly from the dormitory to the center. At this time, the sky was already completely bright and many people were slowly waking up from the night. After arriving at the center, Lin Sheng saw the teleportation doors. He took out his token and found the one at the entrance. He chuckled and walked in. When Lin Sheng entered the teleportation door and arrived at the 10,000 feet tall stone platform, Ding Mingyu and Jun Luo had already arrived. There were also 3 unfamiliar figures. These 3 people were 2 men and 1 woman. One of the men was abnormally strong. His body was as huge as a gorilla. Even his face was incomparably resolute. He had a sinister but bright smile on his face. There was also a scar on his right cheek. His short hair was like a hedgehog, and he looked very valiant. The other man, on the other hand, was gentle and elegant. His expression was calm, and there was a mysterious smile on his handsome face. There was a scholarly smell coming from him. If he wore a pair of glasses and held a book in his hand, Lin Sheng had no doubt that he would be a scholar. The woman was wearing a tight blue robe. She was tall, and her ink-black hair had a natural curve on her shoulders and fell to her waist. The ends of her hair were slightly curled to the sides. There was a hint of coldness in her clear and bright Mei Mao. Her thin lips were as delicate and alluring as soft petals. Different from Ding Mingyu's indifferent coldness, this woman's coldness belonged to the coldness on her face. Her clear Mei Mao contained a faint warmth. When Lin Sheng saw the 3 of them, he understood. They must be the other 3 people that Ding Mingyu had mentioned. Lin Ran, Chuan Mu, and Zhong Songling. When Ding Mingyu saw Lin Sheng, she nodded slightly and introduced the 2 parties. When he heard Lin Sheng's name, Chuan Mu could not help but laugh. It was as deafening as thunder. Fortunately, there was no one on the stone platform early in the morning. Otherwise, it would have attracted a lot of attention. "Lin Sheng? Of course I've heard of you. I was watching on the Battle King platform the other day. The counterattack of the array at the end was really eye-opening. Well done. Chuanmu laughed and patted Lin Sheng on the shoulder. Lin Sheng liked his candid and natural personality. Hee, since you're a array master, there will be many things that we can use you for along the way. We are companions for this mission. We must trust and help each other. Chuanmu put his arm around Lin Sheng's shoulder and said with a smile. Seeing the 2-meter-tall, burly man holding him in his arms, Lin Sheng immediately felt that he was very small and exquisite. His cheeks could not help but twitch. He laughed dryly and said, "Then I'll have to trouble Senior Chuanmu to take care of me." Generally speaking, he had a good impression of this burly man with a hedgehog head. He also knew that Chuanmu was once the 8th on the devil rankings. He was also at the peak of the devil rank. However, because of Yun Nuoxing's sudden rise, he was pushed to the 9th place. Zhong Songling also regretfully dropped out of the top 10. However, she did not particularly care. While the few of them were conversing, the space in front of them rippled again. Soon after, 4 figures appeared in unison. Lin Sheng smiled slightly when he saw the 2 people at the front. These 2 fellows were the last to arrive. Sorry. I slept late. A head of colorful hair fluttered in the wind, like the most mysterious color in the world. That pretty face that was prettier than a girl had a light and bright smile. A black windbreaker was tightly wrapped around his body. That appearance was naturally Yun Nuoxing. Behind him were Xian and the other 2. There's no hurry. The timing is just right. Jun Luo covered her mouth and smiled. After that, she looked behind him. Mei Mao's eyes flickered as she asked, "Are you bringing along your 2 sisters?" Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing shrugged and sighed. The 2 girls refused to stay behind no matter what. In any case, they are not students of the Far Light Academy. Moreover, they are only at the immortal rank. There won't be any problems with the rules. There won't be any problems on the journey. I'm here. Dingmingyu looked at this scene. A faint smile flashed past Mei Mao's eyes. She nodded at him and then smiled at Little Moon, who was waving at her. I didn't expect that the last 2 would be the 2 of you. Junior brother, your current devil rankings is even higher than ours. Chuanmu released Lin Sheng and walked towards Yun Nuoxing with a smile. His palm, which was the size of a praying mat, patted Yun Nuoxing's back and laughed. Yun Nuoxing bitterly smiled and shook his head. He clasped his hands and said, "Senior brother, senior sister, I'm sorry. I pushed you guys down by 1. We don't mind." However, Song Ling has been mumbling for a long time. She seems to be a little resentful. Lin Sheng smiled. After that, he glanced at Zhong Songling, who was at the side. "How can I be resentful? I'm not mumbling. If I'm pushed down, so be it. Who asked me to be weaker than them?" Zhong Songling rolled her eyes at him. After that, she smiled at Yun Nuoxing and Xian. Compared to the coldness on her face, her smile was extremely beautiful. Even her willowy eyebrows were slightly raised. Dingmingyu smiled faintly and said, "All right, it's about time. Let's head out. We will talk about this mission in detail on the way." Yun Nuoxing, Lin Sheng, Chuanmu, and the others also nodded, indicating that they had no objections. Chapter 664. In the extreme northwest of Xiaoguang City stood the 2 supreme academies of the city. Although they had always stood quietly in a corner, ignoring the hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of Xiaoguang City, no one dared to underestimate the strength of these 2 academies, especially the Far Light Academy. In the beginning, only the Far Light Academy existed. Later on, a huge city slowly grew around the academy, which was Sunrise City. It was extremely famous in the southern region of the Taiyuan region. At this moment, on the Far Light Academy's stone platform, the space suddenly rippled like the surface of a lake. Then, one figure after another slowly walked out. When they saw the outside world, they couldn't help but gasp lightly. Yun Nuoxing turned around. Although she could still see the Far Light Academy, there was a strange barrier not far in front of her. The barrier seemed to have split the stone platform into 2 regions. The platform in the Far Light Academy was tens of thousands of meters tall, but when she walked out of that region and arrived at Sunrise City, the stone platform was only hundreds of meters tall. It was as if there was a gap in space. So this is Sunrise City. It's so big. Lin Sheng looked out from the platform. He could not help but sigh when he saw the boundless city that contained mountains, rivers, and rivers. It was like a miniature world. A city is a world. To ordinary people, a complete city is where they live for the rest of their lives. There are mountains and rivers. It's like a miniature world. Even cultivators with lower cultivation can cross 2 or 3 cities. The higher their cultivation, the greater the places they can reach. They can cross the Taiyuan region, the Divine Land, and even other places. Yin Nuoxing chuckled when she saw him sigh. There are also barren areas in the huge city. They're also split into 5 regions: east, west, north, south, and center. It's just like how the Taiyuan region is split into 9 regions. Isn't it very similar? Yin Nuoxing continued. The Farlight Academy is in the northwest of Sunrise City. The entrance to the labyrinth is in the east of Sunrise City. It'll take at least 2 days to cross it. If we get delayed on the way, it might take 4 or 5 days, Ding Mingyu said indifferently. She agreed with Yin Nuoxing's words. The Taiyuan region stage is too big. Setting us aside, even Sunrise City is extremely vast. Although our Farlight Academy and the Remote Ocean Academy are not located at the center, we're still the strongest forces in Sunrise City. Ding Mingyu's voice was very indifferent, but there was a special attraction to it. However, even if that's the case, the students who go out for training will not have a smooth journey. Our 2 factions are not the only factions in Xiaowang City. Junior Brother Yin is right. A huge city is a miniature version of the world. Sunrise City is also filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Its territory spans hundreds of thousands of miles, and it has a population of several billion. The forces there are as many as the stars in the sky. There's a mix of good and bad. Who knows how many powerful characters there are? Even God-level powerhouses are not in the minority. The students who leave the Farlight Academy can only rely on themselves. Once a student dies, the Academy's elders will conduct a thorough investigation. If the culprit is found, they'll issue a hunting mission. Even so, the students who go out for training every year will meet with mishaps due to various reasons. The Farlight Academy might be able to avenge a portion of them, but the rest can only disappear in vain. At this point, Senior Ding's cold and pretty face fluctuated a little. Soon after, she sighed. Once we leave the academy, it will be a battlefield. The outside world is no longer our ivory tower. There are only cruel iron rules. No one will even remember the death of the weak. Everyone nodded slightly. Lin Sheng also sighed. Stepping out of the Farlight Academy meant that they would lose all their protection. There would no longer be the Academy's rules that restricted the students. Instead, they would be replaced by the most primitive law of the jungle. If they wanted to survive, they could only become stronger. Everything depended on their own ability. What the Academy could provide was a stable and quiet place to cultivate. Once they left the Academy, what was left was a battlefield where they constantly rolled in iron and blood, where they were constantly being tempered. It was also like the path of cultivation. On this battlefield, only by advancing courageously and not retreating could one truly embark on the path of the strong. Lin Sheng exhaled softly in his heart. The ripples in his heart slowly subsided. The gentle smile on his handsome face disappeared and was replaced by a mountain-like calmness. It was as if he had become a different person. Even his temperament had changed. That feeling was as if the fangs that had been hidden for a long time had opened once again. Although this slight change was small, it was still noticed by Ding Mengyu, Lin Ran, Chuan Mu, and the others. Surprise flashed across their eyes. That blade-like gaze was like that of an assassin who had walked on the edge of a knife for many years. Then, they turned their heads and looked at Yin Nuoxing. Their gazes could not help but pause. At this moment, Yin Nuoxing had unbuttoned the tight buttons of her windbreaker. The wide black windbreaker fluttered in the wind. She looked very free and easy. There was a mysterious and arrogant smile on her delicate face. Her colorful eyes emitted an extremely terrifying sense of danger, causing people to tremble slightly when they looked at her. If Lin Sheng was an outstanding assassin, then Yin Nuoxing was a monster that had been released from a cage. That terrifying sense of oppression caused even their hearts to palpitate. These two juniors are quite powerful. Some thoughts flashed across their minds. Ding Mingyu regained her senses and looked into the distance. She said softly, "Let's go. Let's hurry to the east of Xiaoguang City." At this moment, they did not know that Yin Nuoxing's smile was because he was very excited. After leaving Longguang Academy, he felt as if he had escaped from a cage and was once again soaring under the completely free sky. He was like a light that had broken free from its shackles. He was like a ferocious beast that had been trapped for a long time, that had finally broken free of its cage and released the little monster in its heart. In this world where it could freely soar, he could do whatever he wanted. The underground labyrinth was a vast world hidden under Xiaoguang City. It was said that it was as large as several cities and was filled with many strange things. There were strange formations and talismans that were unfolding. It was said that this was an underground world created by a high-level god, and that treasures were buried in the deepest part of the labyrinth. The first person to discover this underground labyrinth was an elder of Longguang Academy who cultivated the earth element. It was said that when he broke through to the nether god realm, his mental strength and soul strength expanded and detected something strange underground. Then, he spread the news of the underground world. It had been more than 100,000 years since then, and the exploration had been going on for tens of thousands of years. However, no one had completely explored this underground world. The unknown and curiosity were always the best motivators for people to move forward. In this underground labyrinth, who knew how many experts had lost their way because they could not find the right direction and ended up being trapped underground. However, this did not stop the footsteps of those who came after. Every year, there would still be many people exploring the underground labyrinth. Some of the luckier ones would find some strange things inside and think that it was an inheritance or an artifact left behind by the master of the underground labyrinth. This filled people with even more enthusiasm as they surged towards the underground labyrinth, treating it as the tomb of an ancient expert. As these matters spread, the underground labyrinth of Xiaoguang City became slightly more famous. Even some of the surrounding cities sent people to explore this place. Although it was not enough to shake the entire Sourcepeak region, it was still a very popular place. At this moment, several figures were rapidly flying through the sky in Xiaoguang City. They quickly streaked across the sky and flew towards a distant place, passing by countless houses along the way. This direction. Little Moon suddenly cried out in surprise as they flew towards a distant place, causing everyone to turn their heads and look at her curiously. Little Moon pulled her hand and smiled at Yin Nuoxing. "Big brother, if we fly in this direction for a while, we'll reach our residence in Xiaoguang City. Big Sister Jean and the others are also there. You haven't been there yet." Yin Nuoxing was stunned and blinked. When he left, he did not look for a place to stay, so he did not know where Little Moon and the others lived. Thinking of this, he suddenly wanted to go and take a look. However, he cast his gaze towards Ding Mingyu, as if asking for her opinion. Ding Mingyu saw his gaze and pondered for a moment. Then, she nodded and said, "Go quickly and come back quickly." Yin Nuoxing also smiled brightly when he heard this. "Thank you." 10 minutes later, Little Moon pulled Yin Nuoxing to a stop. Everyone else also slowly stopped and lowered their heads. When they saw the enormous residence, they could not help but be stunned. However, Yin Nuoxing had already pulled the 3 girls down slowly. After descending to a certain point, a huge and extremely complicated formation suddenly rushed out of the void, startling Ding Mingyu and the others. However, Yin Nuoxing only smiled and waved his hand. Then, he pulled the 3 girls towards the formation and merged into it. This formation was clearly Yi Shi's masterpiece. He had seen it before and knew how to enter. Hence, it did not take much effort for him to enter. That formation is definitely the undulations of a divine-level formation. When Lin Sheng saw the huge formation, a serious look appeared in his eyes. His gaze swept across the interior of the residence, and he thought to himself, as expected, they could not see anything inside from the outside. There was a huge high-level formation here that prevented outsiders from prying into it. Even mental energy and soul power could not penetrate it. Everyone also recognized that the formation was not simple. They looked at each other, but did not think much of it. They quietly floated in the sky and waited for Yun Nuoxing and the others to come out. In the courtyard of the residence, Princess Jean, who was reading in the pavilion, suddenly raised her head. Then, she saw a group of figures appear in the sky not far away. When she saw the leader, Mei Mao paused for a moment. When she saw them land in front of her, she could not help but smile faintly. She pulled Yun Nuoxing over and rubbed his head with her jade-like hands. "Why are you back?" Sister Jean. Caught off guard, Yun Nuoxing was stunned. When he returned to his senses, he felt a soft hand rubbing his head vigorously. He smiled bitterly and said, "Isn't there an underground labyrinth in the east of Xiaoguang City? The Academy has a mission to explore the labyrinth. I just happened to get bored of staying here, so I came out for a walk." "Oh," Princess Jean nodded. She had heard about the underground labyrinth during the past few days in Xiaoguang City, so she did not doubt him. A while later, Mei Mao paused. She held Yun Nuoxing's face with her jade-like hands. Mei Mao stared at him closely and asked in confusion, "Little star, how did you become a girl?" With that, Xian and Little Moon burst into laughter. Yun Nuoxing's face twitched violently. He smiled bitterly for a long time before telling them about the seven-color Aurora celestial pond. Princess Jean was also stunned. She did not expect him to encounter such a thing. "Is it your classmate? Looks like you've completed the mission I gave you." Princess Jean raised her head and saw Ding Mengyu and the others outside. She could not help but smile. "I'll give you a reward when you come back from the labyrinth." Speaking of rewards, Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. He had not even finished digesting the things he was given that day. What reward? After chatting and laughing for a while, the Golden Crown Princess seemed to have suddenly become naughty. She smiled slyly and took out a pair of purple gemstone earrings from her earrings. She looked at Yun Nuoxing and smiled mischievously. Yun Nuoxing was stunned. Before he could react, Princess Jean suddenly pulled him into her embrace. At this moment, he felt extremely uneasy. But before he could struggle, Princess Jean held him down tightly. Her jade-like hands pinched the amethyst earrings and gently pinched them under his earlobe. "Damn, sister, what are you doing? This is better for Xian than for me. Why can't I take it off?" Yun Nuoxing's pretty face instantly flushed red after being pinched by the two strings of earrings. She hurriedly reached out to pull them away. However, the earrings that seemed to be gently pinching his earlobe seemed to be tightly clasped there, as if a needle had pierced through his earlobe and was hanging there, unable to be pulled out even if she wanted to. Haha, not bad. They're pretty. All right, hurry up and get out. Don't let your classmate wait for too long. Princess Jean nodded in satisfaction when she saw his expression. She could not help but laugh. But, Xian, drag him out. Don't dawdle. Yun Nuoxing wanted to say something, but Princess Jean snapped her fingers and looked at Xian. Xian also smiled sweetly. He and Little Moon each held one arm and flew up into the sky. Yun Nuoxing was so shocked that he screamed in fear. How the hell am I supposed to meet people like this? Chapter 665. Outside the barrier, Ding Mengyu and the others waited quietly for Yun Nuoxing and the others. However, not long after, the space started to wriggle again, and a magic array quietly appeared. Then, like a door opening, Yun Nuoxing and the others were released. Ding Mengyu and the others also turned their gazes, and they could not help but be stunned. The two purple gemstone pendants that the Golden Princess hung on Yun Nuoxing's earlobes were neither too small nor too big. It was just enough to be seen clearly without being too much of an eyesore. Therefore, Ding Mengyu and the others immediately saw the two beautiful pendants under his ears. Today's weather is not bad. Lin Sheng laughed dryly. and quickly turned his gaze away. However, he still accidentally turned back to look at Yin Nuoxing from time to time. He had completely turned into a girl. In the past, he could still comfort himself that he was a cute boy, but now, Chuan Mu and Lin Ran could not help but cover their eyes. This scene, the corners of Ding Mingyu's eyes twitched. Mei Mao looked curiously at Yin Nuoxing. What happened in less than 10 minutes? I'm going to go back and fight with her. Seeing everyone's strange expressions, Yin Nuoxing suddenly roared and turned to rush in. Zian saw this and quickly hugged him to stop. He smiled bitterly and said, "Little star, calm down. You can't beat Sister Jean either." "I can't beat her. I can't beat her. I can't beat her. Damn it." When Yin Nuoxing heard this, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he became angrier. After roaring for a while, he felt that it made sense. I think it quite nice. Sister Jean would not give you a pair of pendants for no reason. Perhaps it has some special use. Zian smiled and rubbed his head. Special use. Yin Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. However, when he thought about it, the Golden Princess would not tease him for no reason. However, when he thought about her expression when she put the pendants on him, he kicked this thought out of his head. There was nothing but embarrassment and anger on his face. After a while, Yin Nuoxing accepted this strange setting. He smiled bitterly and comforted himself. Forget it. Anyway, these two pendants do not look like ordinary items. Let's just treat them as special items. Let's go. Yin Nuoxing's cheeks trembled. He shook his head helplessly and smiled at Ding Mingyu and the others. However, his smile was forced. Upon seeing this, Ding Mingyu indifferently glanced at him with her beautiful eyes. There seemed to be a trace of a smile in the depths of her eyes. Nodding her head, her delicate body moved and continued to fly towards the east. Behind her, Lin Sheng, Lin Kuei, and the rest, who had been holding back their laughter, hurriedly chased after her. Yin Nuoxing also followed with a bitter face. Time flew by quickly. Although Yin Nuoxing could cover this distance very quickly with his speed, it was not convenient for him to tell Ding Mingyu and the others. He could only obediently follow behind them. With everyone's speed, 3 days was enough to cross a huge city. After passing through this desolate area, we'll arrive at a small city at the entrance of a maze. Although it's very far away, we're still in Xiaoguang City. The small city in the east seems to be called Maze City. This place is the center of the maze's entrance. Because there are too many experts, there aren't any powerful experts guarding this place. Thus, this place has always been ungoverned. If we were to walk around here, we might accidentally bump into a god expert. Even if you are an expert, you will encounter divine experts. A miniature of a small town rose from the horizon. The group sped toward the small city. Ding Mingyu's light voice also echoed in the ears of Yin Nuoxing and the others. After muttering to herself for a while, Ding Mingyu said, "Let's settle down first and gather some information. We'll see how the underground labyrinth is recently and whether it's suitable for us to enter." Yin Nuoxing and the others nodded. Ding Mingyu was the one who knew the most about the mission, so they naturally had no objections to her suggestion. Ding Mingyu gently nodded when she saw this. Her delicate figure moved, and she slowly descended towards the entrance of the small town. Yin Nuoxing and the rest quickly followed. This small town was located in Xiaoguang City. It did not have any city walls, and was merely a small city that had been established in a relatively empty area. However, even though it was small, it still had everything it needed. At a glance, one could see that this small city was quite complete. As soon as they landed, Yin Nuoxing's body trembled violently. The tremor was so great that even Ding Mingyu saw it. Then, she heard him open his mouth in astonishment, and his pupils slightly shrank. Yin Nuoxing involuntarily clenched his fists. He had a slightly puzzled expression on his face. Several divine tools in his body were gently trembling, especially the divine radiance mirror. Zian smiled apologetically at Ding Mingyu and the others. Pulling Yin Nuoxing to the side, he asked softly, "What's wrong?" "The divine radiance mirror is trembling. A few of my weapons also seem to have sensed something." Forcefully suppressing the trembling of the weapons in his body, Yun Nuashing took a deep breath and exhaled. After a while, he said solemnly, "If I'm not wrong, there's something in the underground labyrinth." Raising his head to look at the entrance of the small town, he saw that it was bustling with activity. Even a small town in the east of Shaowang City couldn't stop countless people from gathering here. After taking a deep breath, Yin Nuashing turned his head and smiled at Ding Mingyu and the others. "Let's go in as well." "Are you all right?" Ding Mingyu's eyebrows twitched as she stared closely at Yin Nuashing. They had all clearly seen the tremor just now. "I'm fine. If there's anything, it'll be in the underground labyrinth." Yin Nuashing smiled faintly and waved his hand. The feeling of being filled with secrets made them feel helpless. However, it didn't ask too much. Who didn't have their own little secrets? Ding Mingyu nodded and waved her hand gently. She took the lead and walked into the small town. Yin Nuashing and the others followed closely behind. After entering the small town in the east, they could feel the surging popularity. The noise made Yin Nuashing feel as if the top of his head was about to be blown off by the loud noise. "Let's find a place to rest and recuperate first. Then we'll go to the places where people gather to gather information. Which one do you think is a good place?" Ding Mingyu turned his head and asked casually. Then he pointed at the places where people gathered. "Restaurants. There are many people there and many people chatting. You can also see some experts gathered there. You can come in contact with more superficial information. As for more in-depth information, even if it's somewhere else, it won't be revealed unless it's mentioned," Yin Nuashing said faintly. Then he raised his hand at Lin Sheng and said, "Next." Lin Sheng was stunned. He smiled bitterly and nodded. After thinking for a while, he said, "Why don't we go to a place like the trading area? Information is most circulated there. If we need to purchase any exploration materials, we can also find the corresponding goods there." After saying that, he looked at Chuan Mu and the others and smiled. "Senior, it's your turn. If it's me, I'll go to the place where the missions are issued. If the missions are all related to the maze, I'll be able to find information about the maze from the missions." Chuan Mu scratched his head and smiled honestly, making his scarred face look even more ferocious. Ding Mingyu nodded slightly and thought for a while. After a while, she said, "Let's go to all three places. First, we'll rest in a restaurant. Then, we'll go to the trading area in the city and see if there's anything we need to prepare. Finally, we'll go to the place where the missions are issued. If there are no accidents, we'll enter the maze tomorrow." Yin Nuashing shrugged and expressed that he had no objections. Lin Sheng and the others also nodded. When Ding Mingyu saw this, she led Yin Nuashing and the others to walk around the city. They found a restaurant that looked pretty good. As soon as they entered, they were met with all kinds of gazes. Yin Nuashing and the others' hearts skipped a beat. Moreover, he felt that many of these gazes were on him and the girls beside him. Lin Sheng also looked at Yin Nuashing helplessly. These gazes had nothing to do with him and Chuan Mu. They were completely attracted by the faces of Ding Mingyu, Jun Luo Yi, Zian, and Little Moon. However, this also seemed to include Yin Nuashing. After all, at first glance, no one would think that Yin Nuashing was a man. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes. He had felt such gazes countless times. He never thought that one day, such gazes would also land on him. He casually took out a gold card from his ring and handed it to the waitress. Then he found an extra-large seat on the 4th floor of the restaurant and sat down. This seat was well hidden. There was an empty space in the middle of the floor. From the 4th floor, one could see what was happening on the ground floor. At a glance, one could see the situation below. As soon as Little Moon sat down, Maymao flapped her wings and looked down. Her soul power wanted to come out from between her eyebrows. However, Yin Nuashing, who was the closest to her, pressed her little head with his hand before her soul power could come out. He said softly, "There are many experts in the restaurant. From what I can sense, there are at least 10 middle-level god experts. One is on our floor, 5 are on the 3rd floor, 3 are on the 2nd floor, and 1 is playing the guqin over there." Yin Nuashing pointed to a high platform on the 1st floor. There were green screens with pictures of mountains and rivers. They were all about 10 feet high and surrounded the platform tightly. However, The sound of Guqin could be heard. It was ethereal and untouchable. It was as if it was close at hand, but also as far away as the horizon. He could open his evil spirit eye and see the situation inside clearly. However, he did not act rashly. It would not be fun if he stirred up a hornet's nest. In this restaurant, there were high-level gods. Hearing his words, Ding Mengyu and the others looked at him in surprise. They did not expect him to be able to sense the presence of god experts. Moreover, he could recognize which level they were at. Yin Nuoxing stretched his ears to listen to what was happening in the restaurant. He heard something that had happened some time ago. He could not help but be curious. He looked at Ding Mingyu and the others and asked, "Did you all participate in the Taiyuan Grand Meeting?" Everyone had also heard the people downstairs talking about the Taiyuan Grand Meeting. However, they did not expect him to ask such a question. They all shook their heads. "I know about the Taiyuan Grand Meeting, but we do not have the qualifications to participate. Those who went were all transcendental forces and famous forces in the God world. Although our academy is a God-grade academy, we can't even pass the threshold of the Taiyuan Grand Meeting. However, the upper house of Yuanguang Academy, 9 Deity Temple, will definitely be able to participate," Chuan Mu said softly. Among the people who went, there were also powerful disciples from those big forces. Gods and goddesses will definitely be there. Those people are probably the strongest of the younger generation in the God world, Lin Kuang said. Strong of the younger generation. When Lin Sheng heard this, his heart surged. Although he had not participated in the Taiyuan Grand Meeting, he had heard some rumors. He also knew that on the day of the Taiyuan Grand Meeting, the scene would be unprecedentedly grand. Countless strong experts and gods would gather, which made him yearn for it. Spirit receiving godly body. Suddenly, a voice came from downstairs. Yin Nuoxing, Zian, Little Moon, and you all shuddered violently. They quickly turned their gazes and scanned their surroundings in a panic. However, they did not meet anyone's gaze. After listening calmly for a while, they realized that the person had unintentionally mentioned the spirit receiving godly body that had appeared at the Taiyuan Grand Meeting. Ding Mengyu and the others seemed to have heard these words as well. Their eyes flashed with amazement. Spirit receiving godly body? He is recognized as a monstrous expert of the younger generation. It is said that he is tall and strong, with broad shoulders and a round waist. He is like a humanoid monster. His entire body emits an evil and dark aura. He controls the light element and countless divine weapons. I wonder if he is ugly. I really want to see him. Chuan Mu suddenly smacked his lips and chuckled. There was a hint of battle intent in his eyes. It seemed that he wanted to fight with the legendary divine physique of receiving spirit. When Yin Nuoxing, Ziyin, and the other 2 women heard this, they were speechless. The 3 women looked at him with their beautiful eyes and looked him up and down. They couldn't help but smile bitterly. How did such a beautiful blue boy become a dark monster that was neither human nor ghost? Who made up the rumor? Tell me, and I will definitely applaud. Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly and transmitted a message to the 3 girls. This rumor was too ridiculous. However, this was also good. He could avoid being recognized. Chapter 666. After talking about the Taiyuan Grand Meeting for a while more, everyone changed the topic. A topic of this level was still too far away from them, so there was no point in discussing it too much. One day, I still hope to see this spirit receiving divine physique. Mei Mao's eyes flickered as she cast a crafty gaze at Yin Nuoxing. That flickering look made her look like a little fox. Yin Nuoxing ground his teeth and mouthed, "Lass, if you dare to say anything, I'll spank you." Jun Luo understood what he meant and blushed slightly. She rolled her eyes at him and lowered her head, muttering something under her breath. Ding Mingyu's gaze swept the area below and seemed to have discovered something. Mei Mao's eyes flickered slightly, but she didn't say anything. She was a little apprehensive. After resting in the restaurant for 2 hours, they also heard some news about the maze. It was said that a huge riot had happened in the maze a few days ago, and it had slowly calmed down over the past few days. Those talismans, spell formations, and all sorts of mechanisms had slowly quieted down. The maze was relatively safe, and it was a good opportunity to explore deeper. Many experts were preparing, planning to explore the depths of the maze in one go in the next 2 days. After gathering this information, Ding Mengyu, Yin Nuoxing, and the others looked at each other and nodded. If there was a large group going deep, it wouldn't be a bad choice for them to follow behind. There were experts at the front, so they only needed to act according to the circumstances. After sitting for a while and not hearing any more useful information, they left and headed toward the center of the maze city. This area was considered the place with the most people in the city. Because it was adjacent to the entrance of the maze, there were many experts coming and going, and the quality of the items on display wouldn't be low. Therefore, this place might be even more prosperous than the 2 academies in Xiaowang City. There were all sorts of high-grade weapons, profound arts, and mental cultivation methods. There were only things that couldn't be bought. Initial god-level experts often come and go from the entrance of the maze. This place can be considered the preparation of the market before entering the maze. The items on display are rarely substandard. This is also a typical place developed because of experts. There's also a high-grade auction house. We can go there and take a look later. Most people with strength will go there. We can also see how many experts have come to the maze city. This time, the maze is quiet, and many experts are thinking of going deeper, Ding Mingyu said softly. Senior Sister Ding, could it be that you've come to the maze many times? Yin Nuoxing asked curiously. The Academy has issued more than one mission to explore the maze, and I've accepted it several times. However, the difficulty wasn't high in the past, and it was always a 2-person operation. This time, the exploration mission requires us to go to a place that has never been before. The difficulty is very high, which is why I've gathered you all together. Ding Mingyu nodded and said softly. Mei Mao glanced at Yin Nuoxing, who seemed to want to say something but hesitated. In the end, he sighed as if it didn't matter. Ding Mingyu's bright eyes flashed with some confusion, but she still probed. The maze is filled with many mechanisms, formations, talismans, battle puppets, and many other inexplicable powers. These layers of protection seem to prevent anyone from entering. This is also the reason why some people have guessed that this is a mausoleum. However, this maze is too big, far beyond anyone's imagination. Moreover, they haven't found anything particularly valuable, so no experts have come to explore the maze. Yin Nuoxing pondered for a moment, then nodded. He wasn't worried about anything. As long as this so-called underground maze didn't trap the power of space, he would have a way to escape. When they arrived at the trading area, Little Moon and Yuer were a little excited when they saw the dazzling array of shiny things. Looking at the 2 girls' excited expressions, Yin Nuoxing suddenly thought of Ming. His bright eyes couldn't help but narrow slightly, and he sighed inwardly. Now that this matter is over, let's go back and take a look. He hadn't seen Little Ming and Little Purple Soul for many years. The 2 girls had been sleeping all this time. Although the God King would said that they were fine, he was still very worried. After a while, the 2 girls grabbed Yin Nuoxing and began to shop around the stalls. They weren't slow at all. Ding Mingyu and the others hurriedly followed after seeing this. There were many gadgets for self-defense, and there were also many tools used to break formations in these stalls. They were obviously used to counter the formations and talismans in the maze, but their grades weren't particularly high. Spell Breaking Needle. I reckon it's at least a 9th grade demon level. It can break a 9th grade demon level formation. Silence Talisman Stone. It can silence talismans and make them unable to be activated. This is only useful before it's officially activated. Although it's a demigod level talisman, it's not very useful. Spirit Exorcism Talisman. Is this maze haunted? Yin Nuoxing looked at the dazzling array of items, and a hint of disappointment appeared in his eyes. Were the so-called decent items these useless things used to make up the numbers? However, while he was looking down on the items, Ding Mingyu and the others behind him couldn't help but feel a little speechless. These items were considered quite high grade. There were demigod level and god level items, but Yin Nuoxing couldn't be blamed. He had a lot of valuable items on him, and he probably wouldn't be interested in anything that wasn't at the holy level, peerless level, level 8, or level 9. On the other hand, Little Moon and Little Moon were very happy looking at the items, but they actually didn't want to buy anything. Most of them just took a few glances, sighed, and then left, leaving the stall owner smiling helplessly. Perhaps it was because he had followed Yun Nuashing for a period of time that his horizons had broadened. Yun Nuashing let out a long yawn. The corner of his eyes caught sight of something, and he could not help but be startled, and this startling caused even some of the weapons in his body to tremble. And after a moment, he hesitantly turned his gaze, looking at a certain stall. On the ground of the stall, there were many weapons, talismans, small accessories, and some stones. Among them, one of them was extremely inconspicuous. It felt like a piece of leftover from a crystal stone. It was dark and ugly. No one patronized it at all. The stall owner was a middle-aged man about 30 years old. He was sitting on a chair with his legs crossed. He was wearing a golden crown. His face was deep, and his face was unshaven. He didn't care about his appearance, but there was a strange sense of neatness. He was holding a book in his hand and reading it carefully. At this moment, the stall owner also saw Yun Nuashing. He stopped in front of her and closed the book in his left hand. He raised his head and looked at Yun Nuashing's face. Then he chuckled and said, "What's the matter, miss? Have you taken a fancy to something?" Hearing this, Yun Nuashing's face darkened. Xian, Ding Mengyu, and the others behind her also turned around awkwardly. They were trying their best to hold back their laughter, and their expressions were very funny. If you want to laugh, then laugh. Hold it in. Yun Nuashing turned around and rolled her eyes at everyone. Then she squatted down and looked at the stones in front of her. After thinking for a while, she tilted her head and pretended to be very innocent. She said, "Uncle, is there anything in these crystals?" "I don't know. I can't see inside." The stall owner squatted down with a smile and patted the 1-foot-long stones in front of him. He said, "These stones were dug out from a dragon vein. I heard that some good things were cut out from the other stones, but their value is not very high. I guess these stones are also smelly stones." Yun Nuashing smiled faintly. The stone hunters called the stones that didn't have anything good as smelly stones. This also meant that this transaction was very smelly and they didn't have any luck. However, what surprised her was that this uncle was undermining her. Did he still want to do business? "I don't want to cheat you little fellows, but the things placed in this position can't be that expensive. So, it doesn't matter if I cheat you or not." The middle-aged man seemed to have seen through his thoughts. He smiled and said. Yun Nuashing heard this and couldn't help but look at the other stalls. Indeed, the quality of the goods nearby was a grade lower than those they saw when they first came in. "Uncle, I want to buy a few stones." Yun Nuashing chuckled. Her delicate face was charming. When the middle-aged man saw her like this, he also smiled faintly. He thought that she was a girl and didn't suspect anything. He also smiled faintly and said, "Look around. These stones are not valuable. 20 kilograms of fine glazed crystals will do." Yun Nuashing secretly glanced at them with his evil spirit eye. However, he indeed found that there was nothing good in them. They were all fine glazed crystals, and the quality was not very pure. After knowing the result, he would feel that 20 kilograms of fine glazed crystals was actually a little expensive. However, he still smiled sweetly and pretended to be very happy. Then, he hurriedly took out 50 kilograms of fine glazed crystals from his ring. It was the size of a wash basin. Then, he said with a smile, "Uncle, I want all 5 stones." The middle-aged man smiled faintly and pushed a few stones that were about 10 feet long forward. Among them, there was a very ugly and inconspicuous scrap. Then he grabbed the wash basin-sized fine glazed crystal and weighed it in his hand. Then he smiled and nodded. Yun Nuashing also happily put it away. He stood up and clasped his hands in obeisance. Then he walked towards Xian and the others. "What a lively little girl. You are all students of the Yuan Guang Academy." The middle-aged man looked at the group of young boys and girls and chuckled softly. Then he sat on the chair again and opened the book to read. Yun Nuashing pulled the crowd and walked quickly. He even walked out of the city. Ding Mingyu and the others were a little confused. They wanted to ask, but when they saw his serious face, they could only hold it in. Little star, is there something strange about that stone? When they arrived outside of me, Chung, Ziyin curiously asked. Looking at Yun Nuoxing's hurried appearance, Ziyin also felt that it was somewhat inconceivable. It had been a long time since he had seen Yun Nuoxing with such a hurried expression. Ding Mengyu and the others also looked at Yun Nuoxing in surprise. They saw him take out the black scrap stone that was about 10 feet long. The surface of the stone was bumpy, as if it had been eaten by worms. I don't know. It's just a guess. Moreover, I want to see it now. Yin Nuoxing laughed. Then, he took out a heavy hammer from his body. The handle of the hammer was about 10 feet long, and the head of the hammer was about 10 feet wide. The entire body of the hammer was covered in a mysterious black color with flashes of gold. It was very mysterious and gave off a very heavy feeling. When he lightly stomped on the ground around him shook. He didn't know how heavy it was. Move aside. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath. He lifted the huge black hammer with his right hand easily and waved it twice. There was a series of explosions in the air. The huge force frightened everyone, and they quickly retreated. Yin Nuoxing let out a long breath. His eyes focused, and then he slammed the heavy hammer in his hand down. Clang! An earth-shattering explosion spread out like a shockwave. The surrounding small trees were snapped in half by this extremely powerful force. Even the ground sank dozens of meters deep because of this hammer. It was as if a huge pit had been smashed into it, forming a small basin. Thick cracks spread out like a spider web into the distance. The loud sound was like a thunderclap. It was so loud that Ding Mingyu and the others quickly covered their ears. Even though they had retreated hundreds of feet away, they still felt their ears buzzing. After a long while, when the sound and movement had calmed down, Ding Mingyu and the others opened their eyes. Looking at the several hundred feet wide basin that had been blasted out and sunk dozens of meters, they could not help but gasp. Then, with a slight movement of their bodies, they hurriedly landed beside him and asked, "How is it?" Yin Nuoxing put the hammer aside and squatted down. On the ground, there was a pure black stone with specks of starlight. It was like the color of a star field. On the surface, there was a faint transparent air current flowing on the surface, as if the star field was leaking air. The black stone was shattered by the hammer. This was its original appearance. This is a star stone. Ziyin looked at the black star field colored stone and said with some surprise, "That rank 7 material, star stone?" Hearing this name, Ding Mingyu and the others were startled. Weapons forged from 7th rank materials were all divine artifacts and were already divine rank weapons. Could a stone randomly picked up from this stall be a 7th rank material? Yin Nuoxing frowned slightly. He seemed to think of something. With a wave of his hand, he took out a star stone. The star stone in his hand had some black air flowing on its surface. He got it at the trade fair outside Lihuan City. He spent 300 kilograms of celestial-grade glazed crystals. After buying it, he didn't pay much attention to it. Now, he took it out and compared it. He also frowned. This star stone seemed to contain something. Moreover, it was resonating with the black stone in front of him. He smashed the star stone into pieces. The black stone fragments fell down, revealing a black stone that was also dyed with the color of the star field. Specks of starlight twinkled, and there was some transparent white air flowing on its surface. It looked the same as the stone lying on the ground. It's not a star stone. Suddenly, Yin Nuoxing sucked in a breath of cold air. His colorful eyes were filled with astonishment. This is star, soul, iron. Ziyin, little Yiya, and little Yiya's beautiful eyes widened. They were extremely astonished. That 12th level material, star, soul, iron? Star, soul, iron and star stone are very similar. It's easy to mistake them. Not all star, soul, iron will be like these two, spitting out soul aura. If it's younger, its aura will be completely contained in the stone. Then, it will be no different from a star stone. Yin Nuoxing rubbed the star soul iron in his hand and sighed deeply. He waved his hand and kept it. He also kept the piece on the ground. Then, he turned his gaze to Ding Mingyu. However, He was stunned when he saw that they were still in a daze. That Star Soul Iron, what is it? Lin Sheng raised his hand weakly. He glanced at Yin Nuoxing and smiled awkwardly. Yin Nuoxing and Xian were stunned. Immediately, black lines appeared in the former's forehead. Compared to that black and swarthy thing, I care more about this thing. Chuan Mu tried his best to pull out the huge black hammer. His face was red from holding back. He used all his strength, and even the ground was crushed by his feet. However, he couldn't lift the hammer at all. Don't waste your energy. That hammer weighs 18 million kilograms. Unless you carry it yourself, others will have to bear the weight of 18 million kilograms. Seeing that he was struggling to pull out the hammer, Yin Nuoxing sighed deeply. She reached out and grabbed the handle of the hammer. Then, she lifted it gently. Hearing the frightening weight, everyone's cheeks twitched. With that kind of weight, one swing of the hammer would be enough to smash through the ground. Let's go. Although I don't know what the Star Soul Iron is, it seems like we have a good harvest even before we enter the auction house. Ding Mingyu smiled gently. Then, she waved her hand and walked slowly toward Mi Cheng. Aren't you guys curious about what the so-called Star Soul Iron is? Yin Nuoxing was stunned. Shouldn't this be the time to display the nature of a good student? Never heard of it. Don't know. Not interested. We're not blacksmiths. It's useless even if we know. It doesn't matter if we don't know. Lin Sheng, Chuan Mu, and the others spread their hands and joked. That's not right. Shouldn't I be the one to reveal the truth so that you guys can be surprised and sell Yinny? Yin Nuoxing was shocked and quickly followed. Hurry up. If you want to sell Yin, sell it yourself. I can even introduce you to a stall. Hey, you little girl. Chapter 667. They spent some time outside the city, but it didn't take up too much time. Even Yin Nuoxing's heavy hammer didn't attract anyone, and the group returned to the trading area without a hitch. In the trading area, the middle-aged man was still sitting there, reading a book quietly. Yin Nuoxing felt a little guilty when he saw him. After all, he had taken advantage of him. However, this kind of transaction was consensual, so he couldn't blame him for not recognizing him. Therefore, he took a detour and walked away confidently. Not long after, a group of 10 people quickly passed through the trading area. In the deepest part of the trading area, there was a golden hall standing tall. The entire hall was emitting a golden luster, as if it was a hall made of gold. At the entrance of the hall, there was an endless stream of people coming and going. Even if they were standing at the entrance, when they saw the decorations inside, they felt that it was incomparably luxurious. It was so luxurious that it shocked everyone. Yin Nuoxing was also stunned for a long time. However, he was not stunned because of how high-end and classy this hall was. Instead, it was because of the 3 large words hanging at the top of the hall, Golden Palace. Yin Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. He still remembered that there was a golden palace in the Divine Sky City, and Jin Heng, the divine son of the Golden Divine Palace, was in charge there. Little star, this is the Golden Divine Palaces. Xian was also surprised when he saw the name, and then he whispered to Yin Nuoxing. Yin Nuoxing nodded with a wry smile. It was true that he could meet the forces of the 9 divine palaces everywhere, including the Yuanguang College and the Golden Palace. In such an expensive and high-end place, anyone who came in and out was a person from a big force. However, this was the Taiyuan territory, not the center of the divine land, so it was not that exaggerated. However, most of the people who came to Maze City were here for the maze, and none of them were simple. After walking into the main hall, along the orderly flow of people, Yin Nuoxing saw a super long corridor. In this corridor, there were several huge doors with numbers hanging beside them. Obviously, they were the serial numbers of the auction house. In front of those doors, there were several well-equipped guards. Hidden under their helmets, their eagle-like eyes constantly scanned the visitors of Golden Jade Palace, alerting them to the visitors. Among these guards, Yin Nuoxing saw a few guards in golden robes. When the eagle eyes swept over him, Yin Nuoxing clearly saw the palms of these 2 guards tremble slightly. This movement was very slight, and if not for Yun Nuoxing's extraordinary eyesight, he would not have noticed it. He was instantly stunned. Was this recognized? In the time it took for him to think, one of the two guards in golden robes suddenly left. The remaining one looked at Yun Nuoxing with a hint of reverence in his eyes and was no longer as cold as before. This caused him to be unable to help but smile bitterly. He had been recognized just like that. Raising his head to look at Ding Mingyu, Yun Nuoxing's eyes rotated. Immediately, he nodded his head and walked forward. In a soft voice, he said, "Senior Ding, let's split up here. If there is anything that catches your eye in the auction later, we can take care of each other." Hearing this, Ding Mingyu, Lin Sheng, and the others thought it made sense and then nodded. Ding Mingyu turned back and whispered, "Be careful. Let's go in first." Yun Nuoxing nodded with a smile, then pulled Xian and the other two girls to the side. After watching Ding Mingyu and the others enter the #1 auction house, he turned back and walked to a more remote place with fewer people before stopping. Little Star. Xian was a little puzzled when he saw Yun Nuoxing walk to a more remote place that was not easy to be discovered. Yun Nuoxing shook his head helplessly and sighed. "You'll know later." Not long after he finished speaking, he saw a figure in golden robes running quickly from the corridor in the distance. Yun Nuoxing looked curiously at the aura of the newcomer, then smiled bitterly. This was an expert above the divine underworld level. He was probably an expert directly under the Golden Temple. Perhaps he was the manager of this auction house. Divine Sun. The figure in golden robes was a young man in his mid-20s. He stood straight like a spear in front of Yun Nuoxing. His expression was solemn and respectful. He placed his right hand on his left chest and bowed respectfully at a 90-degree angle. This made Yun Nuoxing smile bitterly. He quickly waved his hand and helped him up. He smiled bitterly and said, Why did people recognize me when I walked into the forces under the 9 divine temples?" Yes, the characteristics of the Divine Sun have long been known to the entire 9 divine temples, as well as the direct subordinates of the forces under the 9 divine temples. Although the identity of the Divine Sun has not been made public, there are people in all the forces under the 9 divine temples in the divine world who know about the Divine Sun. Your arrival brings light to our humble dwelling. The young man said respectfully. Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly and shook his head. What was this? Although Big Sister Jean had told him that he would take over the 9 divine temples sooner or later, which meant that he would one day become the great hall master of the 9 divine temples, the other side of the 8 characters had not been set yet. There was no need to be so abnormal. Had the succession ceremony been prepared? I'm Jean Huan. Since the Divine Sun has come here, you must be planning to explore the maze. There's still some time before the auction starts, and I've already made arrangements for your friend. With the remaining time, please allow me to explain the situation in the maze in detail, Jean Huan said respectfully. Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly and waved his hand quickly. He said, Uncle Huan, just call me Little Star. Don't call me sir. Just be normal. All right. Jean Huan smiled faintly, then began to talk about the maze in a soft voice. So far, our progress in exploring the maze has not been very good. The entire maze is a huge house of mechanisms, and every corner is filled with mechanisms, formations, and charms. The levels range from the 9th grade of the magic rank all the way to the 7th grade of the divine rank, and there are also many dangerous elemental creatures. However, this maze should be divided into many levels. According to speculation, there should be 20 levels, and every 3 levels will lead to a larger underground hollow world. It's like a small world, and that's a relatively safe area. At this moment, the 15th level is the limit of our exploration. Recently, the formations and charms operating in the maze have been activated, and it's followed by a period of relative quietness. In the next 2 days, there will be a large-scale exploration, and they will go all the way down from the 15th level. Upon hearing this, Yun Nuoxing's eyes narrowed slightly. 20 levels. If they explored the 15th level, they would have to go to the 16th level at least. Uncle Huan, do you know when this maze was formed, and can you deduce what's in a maze? What's the meaning of the maze's existence? Yun Nuoxing asked softly. Hearing this, Jin Huan shook his head slightly and said, I only know that this maze has existed for a very long time, and it might even be left behind from the previous era. The elemental creatures inside are derived from the formations, and there are endless numbers of them. Moreover, the formations of the entire maze are connected. In other words, if we want to break the formations of the maze, we have to break all the other formations of the maze together. The creator of this maze might be a Grandmaster Formation Master. As for what's below, we haven't found anything special that's worth mentioning. Perhaps the answer we want is at the bottom. After hearing this information, Yin Nuoxing frowned slightly. The mission issued by the Academy was to explore an area that had never been seen before. Could it be that they had to go to the 16th level? This seemed a little difficult. He had to carry 4 or 5 eternal weapons and 2 great divine weapons to protect everyone through a grade 7 divine level formation. What about the creator of the maze, the Grandmaster? Yin Nuoxing smiled bitterly. Divine level formation masters were Grandmasters, and grade 8 divine level formation masters and above were Grandmasters. Yishi happened to be at this level. Her method of setting up formations was amazing, and a mere formation master like him could only kneel before her. I have a complete set of equipment here. Divine Sun, if you need it. Jin Huan took out a golden pearl the size of a fist and handed it to Yin Nuoxing. When Yin Nuoxing heard this, he wanted to refuse directly. With his methods, he could even block a grade 9 divine level formation. Back in the secret realm of the group of mountains, when the Divine Spirit Palace descended, he also used the Whirlpool Zither to block the pressure of the Divine Spirit. However, if he was forced to that step, his identity would be exposed. After hesitating for a while, Yin Nuoxing still took the pearl. His soul went into it to take a look, and some surprise appeared on his face. The pearl contained many small tools that could counter formations, and their grades were very high. Among them, there was a realm-breaking pearl that could at least break a grade 7 divine level formation. Compared to those sold outside, it was of a much higher grade. Thank you, Uncle Huan. The situation requires it, so I won't be unreasonable. Yin Nuoxing solemnly put it into his ring, nodded at Jin Huan, and smiled. Jin Huan also smiled and said, You are the person that the 9 Deities Temple has been waiting for many years. Everyone in the 9 Deities Temple is waiting for your growth. Everyone is looking forward to you. If you are the Divine Sun, you will definitely reach unprecedented heights. Perhaps you will be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the ancestors. May the spirits of the 9 deities in heaven protect you. Jin Huan bowed deeply. Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath, and his expression was slightly solemn. He cupped his hands and said softly, May the spirits protect all living beings. Yu wanted to laugh when she saw this scene, but for some reason, she couldn't laugh. She felt a very ancient and solemn aura, as if it had been passed down from a long time ago and was still being passed down to this day. After chatting for a while, Jin Huan respectfully escorted him to the first auction house. His seat was in the row of boxes on the second floor, and it was at the side. Although those who could go up to the second floor were all people of high status, the corner seats were not so conspicuous. Of course, this was at Yin Nuoxing's request. She originally wanted to send him to the most luxurious box in the center. After Yin Nuoxing and Xian sat down, they glanced around and couldn't help but be stunned. Ding Mengyu and the others happened to be just below them. They were only about 10 feet away, so they could see them from the side. He also smiled and sent a voice transmission to them. The others were a little surprised to see them in the box, but they didn't ask much and just nodded. The appearance of Yin Nuoxing and the others attracted many people's attention, especially the people in the other boxes. Pairs of eyes carefully observed them, trying to see who the newcomers were from their appearance. However, Yin Nuoxing's characteristics were not recognized by many people except for those who were familiar with him and the people of the 9 Deities Temple. Yin Nuoxing also turned his gaze and looked faintly at the boxes. However, what made him feel awkward was that he didn't know any of them. However, although he didn't know them, he could sense a relatively strong aura from those people. Although not every box had strong gods, there were still some beginner-level gods. The more strong people gathered, the more helpful it would be for them to explore the maze. When the time came, it would be good for them to follow behind. He didn't need to do anything, and it would also save him the danger of exposing his identity. Ding Mingyu, Chuan Mu, Lin Sheng, and the others also stared at the boxes above. After a while, they all smiled faintly. Obviously, they were thinking the same thing as Yin Nuoxing. However, a group of beginner-level gods have gathered here. Could it be that there's something in this auction? Yin Nuoxing rested his chin on his palm and saw that those people were staring at the auction stage attentively. There was some light and greed in their eyes, which made Yin Nuoxing a little interested. Chapter 668. Ding! The clear sound of the bell suddenly reverberated within the enormous auction ground. Immediately, the numerous figures within the auction ground stopped their conversations. Their eyes were fiery hot as they looked towards the enormous auction stage. The auction had finally begun. Compared to the enthusiasm of these people, the color-haired young man in the corner box was clearly not interested in these things. He closed his eyes and started to cultivate. When Lin Sheng and the others heard the sound of the bell, they sat up slightly and looked at the stage with interest. Under the attentive gazes of countless people, the curtain on the spacious auction stage was slowly pulled up, and a young man in golden clothes appeared before everyone's eyes. Seeing this person's appearance, a wave of astonished whispers resounded in the auction hall, as though everyone was surprised by the appearance of this young man in golden clothes. After the young man in golden clothes appeared, he cupped his hands and said with a smile, "This old man is Jin Huan, the manager and chief auctioneer of the Golden Divine Palace's Golden Jade Palace's auction hall in Xiaowang City. Today's situation is special, so this old man will host the auction. First, I would like to thank everyone for coming. Golden Jade Palace, Golden Divine Palace." When Chuan Mu heard these names, a serious look flashed across his eyes. The Golden Divine Palace's Golden Jade Palace has branches all over the Divine Realm, especially in large cities. In those places, the Golden Jade Palace is the best auction hall. Yin Nuoxing secretly transmitted her voice to Lin Sheng and the others. Then, she looked at the stage with surprise. She did not expect Jin Huan to personally host the auction. Lin Sheng and the others suddenly understood. However, a moment later, they looked at Yin Nuoxing strangely. At this moment, the latter was lazily lying on the chair with her eyes closed, as if she did not care about anything. They could not figure out what was going on. "Haha, Elder Jin, you're too polite. What's so important that you have to personally come to the stage?" Faint laughter came from one of the boxes. There was a hint of mockery in the voice, but it was mostly due to respect and fear. On the stage, Jin Huan smiled and did not reply. With a wave of his hand, the empty ground beside him suddenly split open. Then a black iron cage rose from the ground. On the surface of the black cage, there were powerful energy runes surging and sealing power spreading out. The black iron cage was several thousand feet in size and was sealed by a powerful sealing power. Inside the cage, a red-black dragon was curled up. The dragon's entire body was red-black, and its hard scales shone with a tenacious light. As if it had sensed something, its huge eyes that had been closed for a long time suddenly opened. The dragon's eyes were faintly dark red. Just its eyes alone were dozens of times larger than an ordinary person's. When it saw that many people in the auction house were curiously sizing it up, anger flashed across the dragon's eyes. It suddenly stretched its body and roared angrily. Its huge dragon claws violently smashed the iron cage. However, the seal in the iron cage was too strong. No matter how it attacked, it was unable to spread even the slightest bit of its power. Yin Nuoxing was originally recuperating with his eyes closed. When he suddenly heard the dragon's roar, he suddenly became alert. He opened his eyes and saw the 10,000 feet large giant dragon on the auction stage. It was unwillingly attacking the metal cage. Its roar was filled with unwillingness and anger. "Big guy, ugh, I really want to chop off my hand." When Yin Nuoxing saw the huge dragon, she suddenly became alert. It was as if she had been injected with chicken blood. Her hands trembled uncontrollably. Her dream was to ride a huge dragon and roam freely in this vast and boundless world. However, after traveling for so many years, she had only obtained 2 dragon eggs. Moreover, they were 2 half-dead dragon eggs. Little star, calm down, calm down. You're drooling. When Xian saw Yun Nuoxing's excited appearance, she smiled helplessly. She hurriedly took out a soft silk handkerchief from her ring and wiped the saliva from the corner of Yun Nuoxing's mouth. Little Moon and Yu also giggled as they played with Yun Nuoxing's long hair. They all knew that Yun Nuoxing's dream was to have a dragon. According to the old rules, the first auction house will only have 3 heavy auctions. The rest will not be as exciting. However, I believe that these 3 auctions will not disappoint everyone. Jin Huan smiled faintly. He gently patted the iron cage and said, "This is the first heavy auction item of today. It's a Shunming scarlet dragon. It has been captured in the endless mountains outside Xiaoguang City. The auctioneer is a high-ranked spirit beast master. If there's a need, he can help tame it or form a contract with it. Even an ordinary person can possess it. Moreover, this huge dragon is still in its infancy. It has unlimited room for growth. If it's properly nurtured, it might even grow into a heavenly monster, monster king, or monster emperor." An uproar rang out in the auction house. If they could buy it, wouldn't that be equivalent to having another Shunming scarlet dragon? Moreover, it was a Shunming scarlet dragon that could grow. The starting price is 1 billion. Of course, as long as it's an item of equal value, it can also be exchanged. Hearing this relatively expensive price, the auction house immediately quieted down. A moment later, this silence was broken by voices from every corner. A huge dragon in its infancy that could rival a Shunming scarlet dragon had unlimited growth potential. If they were willing, they could even turn it into a monster emperor-level existence. This kind of temptation, just hearing the starting price, made Lin Sheng want to spit out blood. 1 billion. All his assets added together did not exceed 3 million. In fact, this was not a small sum. However, in front of him, there were still several zeros missing. A Shunming scarlet dragon is only worth 1 billion? I feel like my cultivation has been wasted. At this moment, Chuan Mu could not help but smile bitterly, making Ding Mingyu and the others speechless. The value of a Shunming scarlet dragon could not be calculated like this. It was only for the auction that the price was clearly marked. This is the first heavy auction item. I really want to know what the second and third items are. Lin Sheng smiled. His eyes were filled with anticipation as he looked at the auction stage. Even if he could not afford it, he could at least take a look. 12 billion. The bidding in the auction house continued for a long time. Suddenly, a bid rang out above Lin Sheng and the others, causing them to be stunned. When they raised their heads, they were stunned to see that the person who had bid just now seemed to be Yun Nuoxing. Junior brother has also taken a fancy to that huge dragon. When Chuan Mu heard Yun Nuoxing bid, he was also a little stunned. However, he was even more stunned when he heard the terrifying price. This price was frightening. When we were chatting by chance, I heard Brother Yun say that he wanted a dragon. I did not expect him to be serious. Lin Sheng scratched his head and smiled bitterly. Although he was a little shocked that Yun Nuoxing had shouted such a high price, he had long tacitly agreed that Yun Nuoxing had some special background. He was not suspicious, but he was a little worried. There were also people in the other boxes in this auction house who were not simple 15 billion. Sure enough, just as Lin Sheng's thoughts settled, a bid rang out, causing everyone to turn their gazes. They were surprised to see that in box number 5, in the middle, a white-clothed young man stood up from the sofa. His face was filled with arrogance as he looked down at the entire auction house. Finally, he looked provocatively at Yun Nuoxing and smiled evilly. His eyes were green, as if there was another meaning behind it. Beside the white-clothed young man sat a middle-aged man. From the beginning to the end, he was indifferent. However, Yun Nuoxing could sense his aura. He was a Shunming expert. Oh, although my net worth is measured in trillions, shouting 10 billion feels like losing flesh. Yun Nuoxing sat quietly on the sofa and ignored the white-clothed young man's provocative gaze. He took a sip of tea and was a little hesitant. Although the Shunming Red Lotus Dragon was good, and he really liked it, he felt that it was not worth it to have two great divine beasts. At this moment, Yin Nuoxing was a little worried. On one hand, he had the phoenix and the white tiger. No matter how much this Red Lotus Dragon advanced, it would not be able to compare to them. On the other hand, owning a dragon was his dream. As for Jin Huan on the stage, when he heard Yin Nuoxing bid, he was also stunned for a moment. Then, he could not help but smile. When he saw Jin Huan frown, the smile in his heart became even wider. He could not help but say to himself in his heart, could it be that the divine son likes dragons? After hesitating for a while, Yin Nuoxing sighed softly, put down his teacup, and said indifferently, 30 billion. Hearing such a high price, the cheeks of the people in the auction house could not help but twitch. They all looked curiously at the rainbow-haired girl. They did not know which great power she belonged to. She actually spoke so boldly. Hee, a stubborn woman. Interesting. I like it. When the white-clothed young man heard Yin Nuoxing bid again, he was not angry. Instead, he chuckled and waved his hand. He smiled evilly and said, 32 billion. This Red Lotus Dragon, I'm definitely going to eat it today. Hearing the first sentence, Yin Nuoxing's forehead suddenly darkened. He could not help but crush the teacup in his hand. Lin Sheng, Zian, and the others tried their best to hold back their laughter. It was obvious that the white-clothed young man's first sentence was directed at Yin Nuoxing. He also mistook the former's gender. When Jin Huan heard this, although he also wanted to laugh, his gaze towards the white-clothed young man became a bit colder. However, this was hidden very deeply and did not show on his face. As expected of a rich person, his increments are in the billions. When the white-clothed young man shouted this price, the auction house was in an uproar for a while. This price was enough to invite a god or god. Was it worth it to buy a Red Lotus Dragon that was only at the god or underworld level? The gazes of the people in the auction house swept over Yin Nuoxing and the white-clothed young man. After seeing the latter staring at the former with a burning gaze, they seemed to understand something and were speechless. Did the white-clothed young man take a fancy to this girl? Yin Nuoxing's face darkened. He took a deep breath and cursed in his heart. If I lose some meat, then so be it. For my dream, I'll eat it. 35 billion. Yin Nuoxing changed his cup of tea and took a sip. Then he slowly stood up. A pair of colorful eyes surged with a sharp and substantial light. His tall body and this action gave him a somewhat mysterious and awe-inspiring feeling. The people in the other boxes also turned their gazes in surprise and looked at Yin Nuoxing and the others. Even a few god-level experts turned their gazes. Then, their gazes became slightly focused, and some surprise flashed across their eyes. They actually could not see through Yin Nuoxing's strength. They only felt that he was a little strange. The middle-aged man beside the white-clothed young man also slowly opened his eyes. His gaze fell directly on Yin Nuoxing, and he frowned slightly. He also could not see through the latter's strength, however. This did not make them very vigilant. They guessed that Yin Nuoxing had some treasure that could block detection. They also did not sense any danger from Yin Nuoxing's body. After watching for a while, the people in the auction house could not help but chuckle softly. Those gazes, which were like watching a good show, made the white-clothed young man's face turn gloomy. He took a deep breath and opened his mouth to bid again. 340 billion. However, before he could bid, Yin Nuoxing immediately interrupted him and increased the price. Her colorful eyes were slightly raised, as if she was looking down on him. The corners of her mouth also cracked into a devilish smile, which made everyone feel that she was very stunning and had a wild beauty. What an arrogant woman! The white-clothed young man was furious. Just as he was about to speak, the middle-aged man beside him suddenly pulled his sleeve. His calm eyes glanced at Yin Nuoxing indifferently. Then he shook his head gently and said, "There's no need." When the white-clothed young man heard this, his expression changed slightly. He did not expect Yin Nuoxing to be so unyielding. However, since the middle-aged man had said so, He could only give up unwillingly. He would still listen to the middle-aged man, but he did not feel very comfortable in his heart. When Yun Nuoxing saw that he was being suppressed, she could not help but twitch her mouth. Her heart was bleeding. She sighed and slowly sat down. 45 billion. Just as she sat down and took a sip of tea, another voice sounded in the auction house. It shocked Yun Nuoxing so much that she spat out the tea in her mouth. She coughed twice and raised her head speechlessly. She looked in the direction of the voice, and her cheeks twitched slightly. There was a young man's figure in box number 1 opposite her. The young man was wearing a green robe. His left hand was behind his back, and his right hand was holding a small folding fan, which he gently fanned in his hand. When one's gaze moved up, one would see a face with a gentle smile. There were 2 small dimples on his cheeks, and his pale green eyes were clear and bright. He seemed to be a very simple young man. His gentle expression moved the hearts of everyone in the auction house. Chapter 669. His simple green robe was unique, but not extravagant. There were a few suns embroidered on his sleeves. He gave off a warm and sunny aura, as if he was the son of the sun. 7 suns. He's from the 7 Glories Mansion. The young master of the 7 Glories Mansion, Qi Yao, actually came all the way here from Xingming City. Is he also interested in the maze? Most of the people present were from the Taiyuan region. Furthermore, they were familiar with some of the major forces in the Taiyuan region. Therefore, when they saw the green-robed young man, they quickly recognized his identity and were a little surprised. The 7 Glories Mansion was a major force in Xingming City. Its young master was the successor of the mansion master. His status was obvious. Yun Nuoxing frowned slightly when he heard those voices. He originally thought that 40 billion was already high enough. He didn't expect that someone would come out of nowhere and mess up his budget. He had enough money to buy dozens of cities, but that didn't mean that he could spend it willfully. For example, the price in front of him had already exceeded his expectations by nearly double. So, should I take it or not? Yun Nuoxing let out a long sigh. He raised his head and looked at Qi Yao. The latter was also staring straight at him. When he saw that Yun Nuoxing was looking at him, he smiled gently. 2 small dimples appeared on his face. He was a cute young man with a hint of childishness. 50 billion. Yun Nuoxing gritted his teeth and once again called out a price that made everyone's cheeks twitch. This price was already crazily attacking his bottom line. Qi Yao smiled faintly. He closed the folding fan in his hand and gently pointed it forward. He smiled and said 52 billion. At this moment, the discussion in the auction house had almost turned the sky upside down. Many people were looking at the 2 people excitedly. Both of them were prodigals. They didn't even blink when they raised the price. This price was many times higher than Qi Lianlong's. No matter how much potential he had, it wasn't worth it. Lin Sheng, Ding Mingyu, and the rest were also shocked. This price was too terrifying. Was there a need to go to this extent? Lin Sheng turned around and saw Yun Nuoxing's extremely ugly and unhappy expression. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. He wanted to persuade him, but didn't know what to say. 55 billion. Yun Nuoxing was trembling all over as she clenched her fists and said those words. Her eyes were tightly shut because of anger. Little star, forget it. Although you're rich, this price is a waste of money. There's no need to do this. Besides, with Feng and the others around, you won't have to worry about not being able to find a better dragon in the future. Xian gently held his hand and advised him softly. I know. Yun Nuoxing nodded with a bitter smile. He knew, but knowing and doing were 2 different things. If he bought it at such a price, he would definitely suffer a huge loss. However, he could still accept a small loss. Even if it was 10 times the value, he could still swallow it. However, at this moment, he felt that this bone was a little hard to chew. His evil spirit eyes slowly opened. Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but look at Qi Yao. Although it wasn't good to peek into other people's thoughts, he still couldn't help but want to take a look. However, his heart suddenly sank when he saw this, and even his face darkened, because he noticed that Qi Yao had no intention of buying Qi Lianlong at all. In other words, Qiao had been constantly trying to cheat him and raise the price at will. You're good. You're very good. You tricked me. I didn't provoke you, right? However, I'll remember this. You guys also have to walk through the maze. Ha! Suddenly, Yin Nuoxing's face became very gloomy. However, it returned to normal in an instant. His soft whisper carried a cold feeling as if it came from the depths of hell. Xian, who heard it, trembled slightly. Then, Mei Mao looked at Qi Yao with some annoyance. She also didn't understand why Qi Yao would act like this. They didn't know him. At this moment, Qi Yao naturally didn't know that Yin Nuoxing already had the idea of eating him alive. Just as Yin Nuoxing saw, he indeed had no intention of buying the Red Lotus Dragon. He only raised the price because he felt that it was fun. He would also let go when he felt that it was appropriate and let Yin Nuoxing buy it. However, this caused the Shunming powerhouse beside him to involuntarily smile bitterly. The young master always did things that others couldn't see through or understand. That young girl also didn't seem like a simple character. If she knew that the young master was shouting for fun, she would probably have the heart to tear him apart alive. Qiao looked at Yin Nuoxing, who suddenly calmed down and was slightly stunned. Then, he couldn't help but chuckle. He opened the folding fan in his hand and waved it gently. He said, 57 billion. This young man must be crazy. Even if 7 Luminaries Mansion is rich, 50 billion isn't a small number. How many kilograms of celestial crystals can he buy with this amount? What a prodigal son. When the people in the auction house heard this voice that didn't have a trace of trembling, they were also shocked. With this amount of money, he could cultivate several high-level gods. Then, everyone turned their eyes to Yin Nuoxing. They wanted to see how he was going to deal with this. Was he going to play along or stop? When Yin Nuoxing heard Qi Yao's bid, he suddenly smiled and sighed softly. If he didn't see through his evil spirit just now, he might have gritted his teeth and raised the price to 60 billion. Unfortunately, he had seen through Qi Yao's thoughts. Qi Yao liked to play so much. Then let him play by himself. Forgive me for not playing along. Just as Xian said, it wasn't worth it to spend so much money to buy a celestial dragon. You might as well think of a way to hatch the ice snow holy dragon's egg. Yin Nuoxing sighed softly. Some helplessness flashed across his face. Under the gaze of countless people, he slowly sat down and shook his head. Looking at his posture, it seemed that he had given up. Why didn't you raise the price? When Qi Yao saw Yin Nuoxing sit down, he was stunned. He was very surprised. He saw the expectation and calmness on Yin Nuoxing's face. He was sure that he would buy the Red Lotus Dragon, so he raised the price again. But why did he give up just like that? The price is too high. You don't care about the money you earned, but I want to vomit blood. With this money, I might as well ask Sister Jean to take me to the Demon God Mountain to find a Demon Emperor. If you want it, then I'll give it to you. I won't play along. Yin Nuoxing played with a strand of his colorful hair in boredom and sighed softly. Then, he immediately sent a message to Jean Huan. Uncle Huan, Qi Yao raised the price to trick me. I won't compete with him. Let him shoot himself in the foot. When Jean Huan heard this, he was slightly stunned. Then he understood. This kind of thing wasn't rare in auctions, but most of the time, it happened between two rivals. This was also a kind of tightrope action. Once the person who really wanted the item gave up bidding, the person who raised the price would suffer. Maybe he would even have to spend a lot of money to buy back the item that he didn't want. 57 billion going once, 57 billion going twice, 57 billion going thrice. Congratulations to the guest in the first box for winning the first auction item today. Jean Huan suddenly shouted after he understood. Moreover, his speed was so fast that no one could react. Even Qi Yao didn't understand what was going on. Jean Huan slammed the gavel in his hand. No, but I... When Qi Yao realized that things had gone out of control, it was already too late. The gentle smile on his face disappeared and was replaced by panic. Just as everyone thought, 7 Luminaries Palace couldn't take out 50 billion just because they wanted it. Moreover, they didn't come for the Red Lotus Dragon this time. Although Shinming's baby dragon was very valuable, it wasn't to the point where they had to get it. Next, the second auction item. However, Jin Huan didn't give Qi Yao any time to speak. He suddenly swapped the metal cage and took out the other auction item. This caused Qi Yao's face to slowly turn bitter. A pair of childish, clear eyes looked at Yun Nuoxing in confusion. He couldn't understand why Qi Yao would suddenly give up. The auction continued. After the first auction item, Yun Nuoxing didn't find anything that moved his heart. He only glanced at the second auction item and skipped it. Although it was a divine grade item, he didn't need it. However, it didn't mean that the people in the other boxes didn't want it. The second auction item was bid by the white-clothed young man and Qi Yao until the sky broke. 3 million. While Yun Nuoxing was resting with his eyes closed, he suddenly heard a bid that was very close to him. He couldn't help but turn his gaze and look down. He saw Lin Sheng raising his hand. Naturally, the bid of 3 million was called by him. Yun Nuoxing glanced at the stage. On the auction table beside Jin Huan's hand, there was a scroll floating in the air. A unique aura spread out from the scroll. It was a little like the fluctuation of a magic array. Moreover, its grade was estimated to be at the 7th or 8th grade of the magic rank. For million, just as Lin Sheng's voice faded, the white-clothed young man in the 5th box also shouted the same price. However, this price was clearly much lower than the first time he competed with Yun Nuoxing. The wealth of the white-clothed young man wasn't something that Lin Sheng could compete with. Lin Sheng raised his head. When he saw the white-clothed young man also shouting a bid, he couldn't help but sigh and shake his head. He couldn't compete with the white-clothed young man. After all, the latter was a rich man with a powerful force behind him. When the people in the auction heard the white-clothed young man shouting a bid, they also turned their gazes. When they saw the fervent gaze in his eyes, they looked at Lin Sheng and the others in astonishment. When they saw the 3 beautiful girls, Ding Mengyu, Jun Luo Yi, and Zhong Songling, who were beside the white-clothed young man, they understood something. It seemed that this guy couldn't afford to provoke the guess in the 9th box and changed his target. Zhong Songling frowned slightly. She was angry when she saw the white-clothed young man's gaze. However, she couldn't compete with him. Their group was probably not enough to fill the gaps between the white-clothed young man's teeth. "Uncle Huan, what's that?" Yun Nuoxing asked quietly through voice transmission. "It's a magic formation scroll. However, this magic formation is incomplete. It was copied from a high-level magic formation. However, this incomplete magic formation scroll has the power of a 7th grade magic formation. If you can find a complete one, it might be a 5th grade or 6th grade magic formation." Jin Huan glanced at Lin Sheng and smiled as he replied through voice transmission. 6 million. Just as Lin Sheng was feeling depressed, another voice came from upstairs. He smiled bitterly. This was Yun Nuoxing shouting a bid. "You." When the white-clothed young man saw Yun Nuoxing shouting a bid again, he was furious. He couldn't help but shout angrily. The middle-aged man beside him sighed and reached out to hold him down again. He shook his head gently. "You're good." After being held down by the middle-aged man, the expression on the white-clothed young man's face changed a few times. In the end, he glared fiercely at Yun Nuoxing and said some harsh words. Then he sat down angrily. Everyone in the auction house couldn't help but smile bitterly. Everything had its vanquisher. The white-clothed young man was suppressing Lin Sheng and the others just now. Now, he was being suppressed by Yun Nuoxing. "This price is a little high." Lin Sheng smiled helplessly. He coveted that magic formation scroll that was comparable to a 7th grade magic formation. However, it was only an incomplete magic formation. Although a complete one had the appearance of a 5th grade or 6th grade magic formation, it was still a complete one. This was just an incomplete one. It doesn't matter. There's no harm in having too much money. It's a waste not to spend it. Yun Nuoxing supported her chin with her palm and said softly through voice transmission. Lin Sheng, Ding Mingyu, and the others laughed bitterly. This was a rich man. They had forgotten that he didn't even blink when he shouted 10 billion. This million wouldn't even hurt him. Chapter 670. As the auction gradually came to an end, the fiery atmosphere became increasingly intense. Other than the three so-called heavyweight items, the other items were also of a certain level. Many people were bidding for them, and even the people in the private rooms would bid for one or two items from time to time. However, once it was their turn to bid, the entire place would become silent. This was because everyone knew that they could not compete with the big shots in the private rooms. The last item of today is also the third heavyweight item. Jean Huan smiled mysteriously. He glanced at the private rooms on the second floor without anyone noticing. Then, he slowly took out an item from his thumb ring. Before the item completely appeared, Yin Nuoxing saw that the people in the other private rooms had suddenly sat up straight. Their eyes were surging with radiance. Even the middle-aged man beside the white-clothed young man turned his gaze over, a fierce glint surging in his eyes. Lin Sheng and the others looked over as well. They saw that the light in Jean Huan's hand had slightly dissipated. A 2-foot-long yellow object had appeared. It was engraved with profound divine runes, and it looked like a sword hilt. Sand flowed down from the two ends of the sword frame, as if it had just been fished out of the desert and had not been cleaned. However, no sand could be seen on the sword hilt and sword frame. Instead, some fine sand could be seen flowing down and disappearing into the air. Ding! As soon as this hilt-like object appeared, a clear ringing sound rang out. Faint yellow rings of light rippled like water and slowly spread in the air. As the ripples spread, countless people in the auction house were stunned. Those who were carrying weapons felt that their weapons were showing signs of going out of control. Images involuntarily appeared in their minds. Yellow sand filled the sky, a rolling sandstorm, a deep yellow river flowing in the sky, and the sun and moon could not be seen. The images lasted for a moment before disappearing. What followed was a terrifying pressure that caused countless people's faces to turn pale. They felt as if the energy in their bodies had been frozen. That pressure made them feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. What is that? Just a sword hilt has such a great pressure. Could it be an eternal divine weapon? All sorts of exclamations rang out in the auction house. Countless people looked at the deep yellow sword hilt in shock. Their pupils had shrunk to the size of a needle. Was this the final item of this auction? The third heavyweight item? What is that? Lin Sheng and the rest also looked over curiously. In this auction, the three heavy items had shocked them. This last item had caused an earth-shattering commotion. I'm afraid it's something left behind by a strong god. However, ordinary gods don't seem to have this kind of pressure. Ding Mengyu and Mei Mao looked at the dark yellow sword hilt and said softly, "Maybe it belongs to a high-level god." A high-level god. Upon hearing this, Lin Sheng, Chuan Mu, and the rest were slightly shocked. High-level gods. Wouldn't that mean that they were at least left behind by strong netherworld kings? At this time, Yin Nuoxing also stood up suddenly. His colorful eyes widened. His left and right arms shrunk under his windbreaker and glowed faintly. There was also a bit of heat. The netherworld sword and Ling Hong sword inside were restless. The two god weapons had such a reaction. If he still did not know what the sword hilt was, then his brain would be damaged. Dark yellow sword hilt, flowing sand, the river of time, the barrier of time. Yin Nuoxing sighed softly. He had also seen the images. Combining these characteristics, he naturally recognized what it was. The Sword of Time ranked fourth in the god weapon ranking. The divine sword record ranked fourth. Xian also repeated softly. She bit her red lips and raised her head to look at Yin Nuoxing. Seeing his sparkling eyes, she knew that he would definitely obtain this divine sword, even if it was just a broken sword hilt. Haha! Everyone, this broken sword hilt was found during the last large-scale exploration of the maze. It was buried in the depths of the 14th floor. After our appraisal, this broken sword hilt is very likely to be the sword hilt of a level 12 eternal divine weapon. However, we have not found the sword hilt yet. Perhaps it is below the 15th floor. Jean Huan gently stroked the dark yellow sword hilt with both hands and chuckled softly. Eternal divine weapon. The auction house was in an uproar. Countless people's eyes turned red. Everyone knew that weapons that surpassed level 9 were called eternal divine weapons. Level 12 eternal divine weapons were infinitely close to the level of god weapons. In the entire divine world, there were certainly many eternal divine weapons. However, the number of level 12 eternal divine weapons could be counted on one's fingers. This was because only gods could forge level 12 weapons. Recently, the maze has calmed down. I think everyone knows that this is a very good opportunity to explore. Perhaps the sword hilt of this eternal divine weapon is hidden in the deepest part of the maze. Jin Huan threw out another big bomb. The atmosphere in the auction house was instantly stirred up. Countless people's breaths became heavier. If this sword could be restored, it would definitely be a level 12 eternal divine weapon. If they could obtain it, they would definitely be able to establish a transcendental force. A level 12 eternal divine weapon. Chuan Mu was stunned when he heard this information. He felt a little dizzy. He had never even heard of such a divine object, let alone seen one. However, at this moment, the hilt of an eternal divine weapon was being auctioned on the auction stage. Sai, such a divine object, let's just look at it. It's not up to us to compete. I think Brother Yun is also. Lin Sheng sighed and shook his head. Then, he raised his head and was stunned. This was because he saw Yun Nuoxing's blazing eyes and unwavering determination. Ding Mingyu could not help but turn her gaze when she heard that he did not finish his sentence. When she saw him looking at the ceiling in shock, she also raised her head. Then, they saw Yun Nuoxing's burning determination. What do you think? Ding Mingyu lowered her head and looked at Lin Sheng. She could see that Lin Sheng was very experienced in doing things. He was like a person who often walked on the edge of a cliff. He was dangerous and deep. Let's wait and see. However, Brother Yin seems to have other plans. We will act according to the circumstances, Lin Sheng said after pondering for a moment. Chuan Mu and the others nodded. Looking at Yin Nuoxing, it seemed that she was determined to get it. That thing was also a hot potato. If she got it, she would definitely attract attention. She might be targeted by the experts of the major forces. Trouble would follow. It seems that Uncle Huan did not recognize the fourth sword of the divine sword record, the sand sword. After all, only the hilt is left. This is good too. Yin Nuoxing nodded gently. Since no one recognized it, it could not be better. As for the so-called trouble, would he care? If he was really annoyed, he could just call Sister Jean and the others over. Although this would expose his identity, the fourth sword of the divine sword record was worth a try. Compared to this, exposing his identity was nothing. In the auction house, many people's eyes were burning with greed. If they could get their hands on an eternal divine weapon, their strength would definitely skyrocket. They would not have any objections, even if they wanted to establish a transcendental force. As long as they could get their hands on it, there would definitely be a place for them in the divine world. Haha, this broken sword hilt is the last item to be auctioned. We will start the auction now. The starting price is 30 billion. Anything of the same value will be accepted. Jin Huan waved his hand and slowly raised the dark yellow sword hilt in his hand. A faint circle of light swept out, as if a circle of yellow sand had enveloped the entire auction house. The faintly discernible power of the divine weapon caused the time in the auction house to almost stop. 35 billion. Chi Yao, who was dressed in green, was the first to wave his folding fan. His childlike eyes were filled with determination. It seemed that the seven luminaries' mansion was determined to get this item. 40 billion. The young man in white also stood up abruptly and glared at Chi Yao with eyes as cold as a blade. When Chi Yao saw this, he furrowed his delicate eyebrows and glanced at the white-clothed youth. He ignored the white-clothed youth's gaze and stared at the broken sword hilt. Just as he was about to call out a price, a gloomy and cold laughter sounded from another room. 45 billion. Beside the young man in white, an old man in yellow robes and box number 6 laughed mischievously. He could not hide the greed in his eyes as he stared at the sword hilt. In the auction house, When the crowd saw the lineup in the 3 boxes, they immediately smiled bitterly and shook their heads. They wanted to compete with the wealthy people in the boxes, but it was obviously like an ant trying to shake a tree. Suddenly, a clear snap of fingers rang out in the auction house. Then, a calm and somewhat cold voice slowly rang out as the crowd was stunned. 80 billion. Everyone suddenly turned their heads, wanting to see who had nearly doubled the price. Then, they saw that in box number 9, the rainbow-haired young lady was quietly staring at the sword hilt. There was only a deep calmness in her eyes that was like the sea. It was impossible to guess what she was thinking. Brother Yun, that thing is a hot potato. You. Lin Sheng was also slightly stunned. Then, he could not help but smile bitterly as he transmitted his voice. I know. It's fine. Don't worry. Yin Nuoxing nodded. Her calm words caused Ding Mengyu and the rest to smile bitterly. Was this the 9 words mantra? However, Lin Sheng still felt that something was wrong. Although he knew that the former's background was very big, there were quite a number of people who had noticed the sword hilt. If they were targeted, trouble would definitely come one after another. Ding Mengyu and the rest originally had the attitude of watching a good show. However, now that Yun Nuoxing had bid, they could no longer remain calm. At this moment, they were also paying attention to the people in the auction house. If Yun Nuoxing was really lucky enough to win the bid, they would not be unaware of the biggest threat to them. Jin Huan was also stunned as he held the sword hilt. Then, he could not help but smile bitterly. I was too excited about the auction. I forgot that this is an eternal weapon. The Divine Sun will definitely be interested in it. I should have kept it. After smiling bitterly for a moment, he calmed down. At this moment, the arrow was already on the bow. There was no other way. They could only rely on the Divine Sun. After all, if he did not have enough money in the end, there was still them. They were the ones who found it. It did not matter how much Yin Nuoxing bid. If he wanted it, they would give it to him. Yin Nuoxing did not know what Jin Huan was thinking at this moment. If she knew, she would definitely raise the price in one go. At this moment, the price of the sand sword hilt had been raised to 100 billion by the young man in white. This price was not low. It was close to 10% of the annual income of a large city. 150 billion. When the price soared to 100 billion, Yin Nuoxing took a deep breath. The number in her heart was soaring rapidly. Her eyes flickered for a moment before she said in a low voice, raising the price by 50% in an instant. Many people in the auction house spat out a mouthful of water when they heard this price. It seemed like this young lady with colorful hair had a great background. Even Chi Yao, the white-clothed young man, and the number 6 yellow-robed elder were silent for a moment after the price of 150 billion was announced. A moment later, the white-clothed young man laughed sinisterly and said in a cold voice, "How bold! However, we won't admit defeat so quickly." The young man in white sneered and said, "The mysterious moon sect bids 160 billion." Yin Nuoxing frowned slightly when she heard this price. Then Chi Yao smiled faintly. It seems like the mysterious moon sect is very confident. Then, the 7 luminaries palace will also join in. Chi Yao smiled faintly and clenched his folding fan tightly. He chuckled and said, 170 billion. If you have the ability, then surpass this price. We don't want it anymore. The entire auction house fell silent for a moment. Then, there was a burst of exclamations. As expected of a major force in Xingming City. To think that they could call out such a price. You guys have forgotten about me. Yin Nuoxing glanced at them and sighed softly. Then she shouted, 200 billion. Come, continue to bid. If you can, then I'll admit defeat. 200 billion was equivalent to half a year's income in Xiaoguang City. Not to mention that the sword hilt was still broken. It was still a problem whether it could be returned to its original position. Of course, how would they know that this was the sword hilt of the Time's Sand Sword, the 4th item of the Divine Sword record? A divine weapon was a priceless treasure. Yin Nuoxing wouldn't feel any heartache even if she threw away a peerless, mysterious crystal. This damned woman. The young man in white smacked his lips. His expression was getting uglier by the moment. Lin Sheng and the others were already numb to this bidding. Every time they heard Yin Nuoxing's price increase by tens of billions, they felt their hearts stop beating. They looked at each other and couldn't help but smile bitterly. This was really inhumane. When the immortals fought, the mortals would retreat. They didn't understand the world of the rich. 20 billion. The young man in white suddenly stood up and smashed the wine cup in his hand. His shout caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air. Did the young master of the Xianin sect have to risk his life to spend 220 billion to buy an incomplete item? Yin Nuoxing's face twitched. This bastard was really difficult to deal with. He had already thrown out such a high price. The clue to the time sand sword is here. I can't lose it no matter what. A thought flashed through her mind. Yin Nuoxing gritted her teeth and nodded heavily. Then, she suddenly stretched out a finger. Everyone was stunned. What was the meaning of this? 500 grams of peerless, mysterious crystal. Come on, follow me again. If you follow me again, I'll lose. After Yin Nuoxing's dark and cold voice sounded, the entire auction ground became dead silent. Even the white-clothed young man and Chi Yao from the seven-star mansion stopped bidding. She had even bid for a peerless grade, mysterious crystal. That kind of price was not something that they could afford. Moreover, the determination of the color-haired young lady made them understand that they would not be able to compete with her. The legendary, peerless, mysterious crystal. It is said that 500 grams of peerless, mysterious crystal is equivalent to 1,500 grams of saint-grade mysterious crystal. 500 grams of saint-grade mysterious crystal is even more valuable than 2,500 grams of immortal-grade mysterious crystal. The immortal-grade mysterious crystal circulating in the market now costs 100,000 gold coins per gram. There was a weak voice calculating in the auction house. Then, everyone silently calculated. Based on this calculation, wouldn't 500 grams of peerless mysterious crystal be equivalent to 750 billion? What was even more shocking was that peerless mysterious crystal was a priceless item on the market. Not everyone could take it out. Usually, those who could take out a divine item like the peerless mysterious crystal were the top forces. Moreover, they were pitifully rare. Those who calculated peerless mysterious crystal were basically calculating it by gram. Yet, he had bid 500 grams. On the auction stage, Jean Huan smiled as he watched this scene. He waited for a moment to get used to it. Then, he raised the small wooden mallet and shouted 3 times before slamming it down heavily. When the auction mallet slammed down, everyone understood that the broken sword hilt had finally landed in the hands of the unknown young girl. Ha! Congratulations to Miss for winning the bid for the treasure. Chi Yao smiled faintly as he glanced at Yin Nuoxing. There was a complicated look in his eyes. Then, he waved his hand and left with his people. The young man in white also glared fiercely at Yin Nuoxing. After gritting his teeth for a while, he said to the middle-aged man behind him, "Elder Hun, find out which force this guy is from. See if we can touch him." "If we can." As he spoke, the young man in white stretched out his hand and gently drew a line in front of him. There was no need to explain what he meant. The middle-aged man nodded slightly. This young girl was very unfamiliar. However, from the looks of it, she seemed to be going to the maze as well. It was indeed necessary to investigate her. "Let's go too," Ding Mingyu said to Lin Sheng and the rest. Mei Mao looked at the box. Yin Nuoxing and the rest had already left. Chapter 671. In the special area of the Golden Jade Palace, Jean Huan was standing respectfully like a long spear. The door in front of him was slowly pushed open, and Yin Nuoxing and the other 3 appeared. Seeing his formal appearance, Yin Nuoxing could not help but smile bitterly and wave her hand quickly. Jean Huan smiled for a while and took out the broken sword hilt. Then, he took out the broken magic formation scroll and handed it to Yin Nuoxing respectfully. If someone saw this scene, they would be scared witless. The manager of the Golden Jade Palace was so respectful in front of Yin Nuoxing that he did not even say much. Yin Nuoxing grabbed the sword hilt, looked at it casually, and then asked Jean Huan, "Was this found in the maze?" "Yes, it's in a very dangerous area on the 14th floor." It's placed in the center of a large formation. We spent a lot of effort to retrieve it, but we still couldn't figure it out. It's probably a high-grade weapon, even among the 12th level Eternal Divine weapons, Jin Huan said softly. Eternal magic weapon? When Yin Nuoxing heard this, he could not help but burst into laughter, causing Jin Huan to be stunned. Could it be that there is something wrong? Uncle Huan, this is not an eternal magic weapon. This is the hilt of the Sword of Time, the fourth item of the Divine Sword Record. Yin Nuoxing stroked the sword hilt and laughed lightly. Jin Huan's body stiffened, and his eyes were full of disbelief. I see. No wonder it has such a strong suppression on weapons. It turns out that it is a magic weapon. At this time, Jin Huan also recalled the strangeness of the sword hilt when he was studying it. If it was a magic weapon, then it made sense. A magic weapon was the king of weapons, and its innate power could suppress all the weapons in the world. What the Divine Sun said, is it true? Jin Huan found it hard to believe. He did not dare to think in this way. After all, it was a magic weapon, an existence that surpassed the eternal magic weapon. Uncle Huan, have you forgotten my constitution? I still have 2 divine weapons in my body. The moment the sword hilt appeared, they reacted violently. I can't be wrong. Yin Nuoxing nodded with a smile. If that's the case, Jin Huan nodded stiffly. After pondering for a while, he said, we haven't found the body of the sword either. Maybe it's under the maze, or maybe it's in a corner of the god's realm. In any case, I'll report this to the Golden Temple and the other Golden Jade Palaces and ask them to help find the body of the Sword of Time. Yes, Uncle Huan. Sorry to trouble you. Yin Nuoxing nodded. This was the 4th-ranked divine sword, so he didn't say anything to decline. The realm of the gods was so vast that it was boundless. With his strength alone, it was indeed very difficult to find it. It would be fine if it was in the maze, but if it was elsewhere, it would be very troublesome. After talking for a while, Yin Nuoxing took out a sparkling golden crystal from his ring. It weighed exactly more than 500 grams. Then, he threw it to Jin Huan casually. Jin Huan was stunned for a moment. Then he hurriedly took the crystal. As soon as the crystal was placed in his palm, an extremely large amount of pure metal elemental energy rushed into his body, giving him the urge to refine it in one go. Divine Sun, this is too precious. I can't accept it. Without needing Yin Nuoxing to say more, Jin Huan knew what it was. It must be the superb grade glazed crystal that the former had bid in the auction house. He rarely came into contact with this kind of resource, so he knew how valuable the superb grade glazed crystal was. It couldn't be bought with money. Uncle Huan, take it. The value of what you're giving me is not worth half a kilogram of extreme grade Qian crystals. Yin Nuoxing smiled and shook his head. Then, without waiting for Jin Huan to say anything, he ran out with Xian and the others. He hurriedly closed the door, leaving only one sentence echoing in the room. Anyway, I still have a lot with me. Hearing this, Jin Huan couldn't help but smile bitterly. Looking at the thumb-sized golden crystal lying in his palm, he sighed and cupped his hands in obeisance to the closed door. After a while, he raised his head and shouted to the empty room, "Go! Beat up those people with bad intentions. Don't let them disturb the Divine Sun and the others. If they do anything out of line." After a pause, Jin Huan took a deep breath. His palm suddenly cut through the air, cutting a huge hole in the space. Then his cold voice slowly sounded. "Then destroy them." After he finished speaking, there were many rustling sounds in the room. After a while, it returned to silence. Jin Huan's face also calmed down slowly. Then, he scratched his head and smiled bitterly. Let's report to the first elder first. After leaving the Golden Jade Palace, Yin Nuoxing sat in the hall of an attic. He took a breath and looked at Xian, who was sitting quietly on his left, and Little Moon on his right. Finally, he couldn't help but sigh. I say, if you have something to say, just say it. Don't you feel uncomfortable holding it in? Yin Nuoxing raised his head and looked at Ding Mingyu, Lin Sheng, and the others on the sofa opposite him. He couldn't help shaking his head. Since he and Xian came back, they had been like this. The latter and the others just stared at him without saying anything or responding, which made his hair stand on end. Hearing this, Chuan Mu, Lin Sheng, and the others laughed dryly. Then, Chuan Mu coughed softly and pretended to be serious. Little junior brother, you don't make friends carefully. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing was a little confused. What do you mean? Look, you know each of our names, but we only know your surname. Chuan Mu smiled and scratched his head. Although he wanted to smile honestly, that scarred face looked too ferocious there. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. He wanted to say that Luo knew his name, but he thought that it wasn't appropriate, so he didn't say it. He rubbed his chin and sighed softly. Although I really want to tell you who I am, you won't believe me even if I say it. Moreover, the name isn't important, right? It's just a code name. In the end, he added in his heart, even I don't know my real name. Right? You don't believe me? Why don't you tell me about it? Could it be that your background is very mysterious? An outsider? Or a visitor from the lower realms? Lin Ran raised his eyebrows and said with a chuckle, would you believe me if I said I was the godchild of the 9 divine palaces? Yin Nuoxing took a sip of tea and said half jokingly and half seriously, I met the godchild of the fire god palace once. He's not like you. Ding Mingyu said indifferently. Yin Nuoxing revealed the fire element, so Ding Mingyu and the others also treated him as a possessor of the fire element. They didn't think too much about anything else, such as whether he had other elements or not. Hey, look, you guys won't believe me even if I tell you. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing helplessly spread out his hands. He had indeed said it, so there was nothing he could do if they didn't believe him. Xian and the others had been holding back their laughter, because Yin Nuoxing had indeed revealed his identity. But perhaps this identity was too powerful, so Ding Mingyu and the others didn't dare to believe it. After all, in the eyes of ordinary people, the 9 divine palaces was an unreachable existence that had stood tall in the god realm for dozens of eras. Their identities were too prominent, so it was understandable that they wouldn't believe it if he said it rashly. However, in Yin Nuoxing's eyes, it was very funny, because he was indeed the godchild of the 9 divine palaces recognized by the Golden Princess and the others. Yin Nuoxing didn't talk much about this topic. He threw the incomplete magic array scroll to Lin Sheng, then said, you guys will know in the future. Then he brought Xian and the other 2 back to their room. Lin Sheng gently stroked the scroll in his hand, looking gratefully at Yin Nuoxing as she walked into the room. Only then did he let out a soft sigh. He also didn't dare to believe Yin Nuoxing's answer. Perhaps it was because there was no obvious evidence. Moreover, why would the godchild of the 9 divine palaces come to an academy to cultivate? Although Yin Nuoxing had said it was because of the spiritual light pagoda, he still found it hard to believe. The next day, when it was still early in the morning, Ding Mingyu, Yin Nuoxing, and the others rushed out of the attic and went straight to the center of the city. The entrance to the underground maze was located in the center of the city. There was a huge, oval-shaped building in the center of the city, which looked like a huge egg. This was the entrance to the underground maze. Ding Mingyu and Yin Nuoxing's group separated into 2 groups. One group was Ding Mingyu, Lin Sheng, Chuan Mu, and the others, while the other group was Yin Nuoxing and the other 3. The auction yesterday had caused quite a stir in the city, especially the hilt of the Time Sand Sword. Although Jin Huan had only said that it was the hilt of a level 12 eternal weapon, and no one knew that it was the hilt of a divine weapon, just the description of the hilt was enough to make countless big forces go crazy. Fortunately, it was only the hilt. If it was the complete eternal weapon, there might already be people plotting to snatch it. The group flew at a constant speed about a kilometer away from each other. As the sky brightened, the vitality of the city slowly awakened. When they saw the huge, oval-shaped building, they really felt how much popularity the maze had attracted. The roads leading to the oval-shaped building were almost completely occupied by large groups of people. Even in the sky, there were many people descending towards the building. When Yin Nuoxing and the others saw this scene, they were speechless. However, they also heaved a sigh of relief. The more people who explored the maze, the lower the difficulty. To them, who were only here to complete the mission. This could be said to be great news. There are so many people. I'm a little scared. Standing in the sky and looking at the constantly moving heads below, Yun Nuoxing felt a headache coming on. He had never expected the maze to be so popular. At a glance, he estimated that there were hundreds of thousands of people here. He turned his gaze slightly and looked at the huge, oval-shaped building. The building was thousands of feet in size. There were many strange symbols carved on its surface. Below the building was a huge platform. On the platform, there was a spacious passage that seemed to lead to the interior of the building. That seemed to be a passage that led to the bottom. Yin Nuoxing frowned slightly and glanced around. The people passing by in the sky didn't stop. However, he still sensed that there was something unusual. It was the same when he came out of the loft. Lin Sheng, the token that I gave you contains a trace of my spiritual power. If you burn it, you can notify me. Also, we are being followed. We are all being followed. Yin Nuoxing withdrew his hands into his sleeves and took out a jade slip. He then whispered to Lin Sheng through voice transmission. Ding Mingyu, Lin Sheng, and the others raised their eyebrows when they heard this. They were being followed? Be careful. If anything happens, immediately burn my spiritual power. Don't delay. We will go down first to explore. We will leave some spiritual marks along the way. The token will be able to sense it. Yin Nuoxing continued to transmit his voice. You go first. Ding Mingyu was stunned for a moment. She wanted to refuse, but seeing the sea of people below and thinking of his mysterious identity, the resistance in her heart weakened slightly. Then, she nodded gently and said, Okay, you guys be careful. Yin Nuoxing smiled and put away the token. Then, he smiled at Xian, Little Moon, and Yer. He pulled the three of them with his hand and quickly flew down the oval-shaped building below. Under everyone's gaze, they rushed into the passage. The passage below the oval-shaped building was a huge platform. On the platform, there were rows of huge steps paved with bluestone that led straight down. Obviously, after going down, they would arrive at the so-called underground maze. At this time, many people were thinking about which passage to take. Many people didn't even think about it and walked down the steps as if they were old horses that knew the way. Yin Nuoxing thought for a while and swept his gaze across the dozens of steps. Finally, he fixed his gaze on the passage near the middle. He landed and left an imperceptible spiritual mark. Then, he followed the crowd down. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.